Boa tarde. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos à Casa do Seguro, um hub estratégico de conteúdo, conexão empresarial
Welcome.
e
You're
negócios,
all
criado para
welcome to
desenvolver o
this
papel do
afternoon
setor de
round,
seguros
and we will
na transição
foster the
climática.
insurance
Meu nome
sector
é Gabriel
during
Pinheiro e eu
climate
agradeço
transition. My
pela
name is
presença
Gabriel
de todos.
Pinheiro, and I thank you all
Iniciaremos
for being
agora
here.
a
We will
programação do
start
City of Wonder.
our City of Wonder
Esta sessão apresentará
session. This session
dados
will
sobre
actually
como
show
soluções de seguros
study case
estão sendo
how
aplicadas para
insurance
impulsionar o
solutions
financiamento
are
climático.
being used to
A partir desses
foster
exemplos, o
um,
debate destacará o papel
the
central
climate
dos
aspects,
seguros
and we
na
will
mobilização de capital
highlight
rumo a
insurance
meta
mobilizing
de
capital
emissões
towards
líquidas zero, o net zero.
net zero
Lembrando que haverá
emissions.
tradução simultânea em
We
30
have
línguas.
simultaneous
Os fones
interpretation
de ouvido
throughout the
estão
session.
disponíveis
The
na
headsets are
entrada.
available in the
A
entrance
agenda
of this
completa
room.
da Casa
The
do
entire
Seguro na
agenda
COP30
of Casa do
pode ser
Seguro
acessada
at
diretamente
COP30
do site
can be reached at our
pelo
website
QR Code
or
no centro
scanning the
inferior.
QR code that you find in the middle of this screen.
Bom, para iniciar o painel, eu
To start a
gostaria de chamar
panel,
ao palco
I'd like to
Luciana Dallagnol,
invite
Superintendente
Luciana
de
Dallagnol,
Sustentabilidade da
Superintendent of
CNseg. Vamos recebê-la com uma
Sustainability
salva de
of
palmas.
CNseg. Let's give a round of applause to her.
Hello, good afternoon from everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to Casa do Seguro here in Belém. Thank you very much for being here with us today. As we are in Brazil, I'm going to switch to Portuguese. E gostaria de dar boas-vindas a todos.
And I'd like to welcome all of you to this event, which is a very important one. If we are here today, we acknowledge how important it is to perform COP30 in Brazil, in the heart of the Amazon. Today's session brings a message that insurance is not about covering losses and damages. We make transformations of the society feasible. Insurance can be and is a milestone to unlock the sustainable possibilities, and we act reducing risks, attracting private capital, and transforming the ambitions on towards climate in possibilities to invest capital. And we acknowledge that insurance will probably become the third pillar of the funding system for climate change. And we offer stability and possibilities to be funded. This session will show several studies that demonstrate in practice how insurance solutions are being implemented to accelerate the climate financing. Through these examples, we will discuss how the insurance sector can continue to expand its contribution to mobilize resources towards net zero. In Brazil, this role becomes even more relevant. Solutions based on nature, renewable energy, and low-emission fuels, sectors that are in the heart of the transition, which is sustainable for our country and for the world. Throughout the year, CNseg started a work together with partners for the development of solutions that are linked to the main points of emissions in Brazil. Before I start, I will invite all of you to participate on a brief survey that is available through the QR code, which is been shown at the screen. City of London with Marsh McLennan created a survey to be answered, inviting all of you to share your perceptions and points of view about this topic. The data from this research involve climate risks, the role of insurers or insurance companies, and how we can improve the lives of communities through climate changes. It's a great honor to introduce our speakers and the moderator of next session. And now I will invite you to come to stage and join me. So first of all, Tobias Green, Chief Climate Scientist and Head of Climate Advisory of Munich RE, welcome.
Rachel
Rachel Delez, Head of Sustainability for Convex Insurance. Dame Angela McLean, UK Government's Chief Scientific Advisor. Amy Barnes, Head of Climate and Sustainability for Marsh Global. And Simi Shah, Director of Policy and Innovation of City London Corporation. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Luciana, for having us here today, but more importantly, for creating a space in which we can talk about the very important role of insurance, Brazilian insurance, UK insurance, global insurance in tackling climate change from both an adaptation and resilience point of view. And thank you also, Marsh McLennan, for being our partner here today, and to all my panelists who you'll get to meet in a second. I'm the Director of Policy and Innovation at the City of London Corporation, and we work with UK-based insurers to both showcase and highlight how the UK is supporting climate change both domestically and through our global product offering. The session today, we want to focus on how UK-based insurers are innovating and creating solutions, product offerings, to make deals happen and to cover the protection gap. These are not ideas, these are products that are already in deployment. So we hope that we can offer this to your community as some examples of what we're doing. We're also thrilled to have Dame Angela McLean, who is our Chief Scientific Advisor in the UK, and she's going to offer what the UK government is doing within this space, particularly focusing on international collaboration. Right. Okay, with that, we're going to have each of our insurers have the floor for a little bit to present their case study and how they're innovating around climate change. And then I have some questions for them, and then we hope that you will also ask them some questions. Before I do that, I just want to say 3 quick things. One is we really want to take the conversation today into the adaptation space. We don't want to just stay in resilience. Both are important. We can do it both at the same time, but we want to talk about the role of insurance in adaptation. This is a wholesale insurance conversation with us. We work with our retail insurance partners, and again, both are important in terms of protecting consumers. But the conversation today is really about the wholesale protection and the focus on protecting deals and ensuring that climate change finance can happen. Lastly, in the UK, we believe we have a strength around ensuring complex problems and complex issues and complex deals. And I hope that you'll see that today. Thank you. Okay, first up is Amy Barnes from Marsh McLennan to talk about their landscape framework. Amy.
Thank you so much. I've spent time at a number of COPs getting frustrated at the conversation around insurance, that insurance is an enabler and insurance can de-risk. But without getting specific, it was really hard to identify where insurance could do things it wasn't doing and where the demand for insurance to do more was. So we worked together with the Sustainable Initiative. The Sustainable Markets Initiative, if you're not familiar, was created in, I think, 2019 by now King Charles, bringing together various industries groups to address complex climate problems. Working with them, we came up with a framework of all of the risks that a transition project may face, thinking about the problems they face before they even get to the final investment decision, during construction, operation, and then ultimately in decommissioning. Because our contention was there were some projects that weren't making FID because they hadn't been sufficiently de-risked. So waiting until that moment was too late. We then wanted to think about the different dimensions of risk, thinking first of all about strategic risk. And strategic risk isn't an area that insurance usually plays. And I know from the work that I do, if I'm going to get a no, I want a fast no. So I think it's important that insurance does that too. If there are risks that insurance is not the appropriate vehicle to manage, let's be really clear about that and not waste time. So there are some things that insurance can do in strategic risk, but largely that's the risk that equity would tend to take. It's not hazard in nature. there are financial risks. Again, insurance can take some financial risks, but not all of them. Operational risks, a category that I think a lot of people will automatically think of the innovation that needs to happen. As we talk about the new technologies that we need for transition technologies, how well do the insurance markets understand them and able to price the risk? And then think about geopolitical and liability risks. So I would have put the landscape on the screen, but it looks a little bit like an eye test. However, the ambition is that it's a really helpful tool to help projects look at the various types of risk mitigation, whether that's insurance, whether it's contracts. In some places, it may well be public sector government, it may be philanthropy, but all of the de-risking tools that can be projects to fruition. And we've been working, as you say, on some real cases. Now, sometimes this hasn't been an insurance innovation, it's been an innovative use of an existing product. Sometimes it has been real product innovation. So if we think in the dimension of financial risk, we see a lot of our clients want to protect their revenue streams. Now, largely companies can't insure their income. That's a strategic risk that you take and financial exposure. But there are places that insurance can do something. If your revenue is dependent on the wind blowing or the sun shining, then that's insurable. And we've been doing a lot of parametric products, a type of product that is triggered by a parameter being breached rather than suffering a loss or a damage, that has been insuring people's revenues, making projects bankable. If I think about credit risk, now to the non-insurance folk in the room, if there are any, what I'm about to say probably won't feel like an innovation, but I promise you it is. Conventionally, when credit insurance is taken out on a counterparty, the counterparty doesn't know that credit insurance is in place, as there's seen to be some moral hazard there. But with a lot of transition projects, they're constructed in special purpose vehicles that don't have financial strength, and so it's almost impossible to get credit insurance for those vehicles. And so we came up with a solution where we had insurers agree that the SPV would be party to the insurance to fully explain their financial model, allowing the credit insurance to be put in place in order that deal could go ahead. So existing insurances with just slightly different applications to enable transition projects. And then there are the areas where we truly need to innovate. We need to innovate for low carbon building materials. How well do we understand how they'll behave? But I'd also talk about carbon markets and our need to innovate there. So I suspect Rachel's going to give an example around innovation of carbon capture and storage. But before we even get to storage, we've got the issues of the emitters. Now, the technology around capturing carbon is not mature. And so there is not mature for all technologies. So we have the potential to provide performance guarantees for the capture technology. But what has been a real barrier to some of the commercial relationships around CCS has been the potential for off-spec product. For the first time, we care about the quality of the carbon dioxide that's being captured. Because if we have multiple emitters commingling their product to be transported and stored, and sorry if I'm geeking out here on the technical aspects, but kind of what we do in insurance, we're suddenly really worried about the specification of that carbon dioxide. If the carbon dioxide is too wet, you'll get accelerated corrosion. Carbon dioxide is explosive. If you have contaminants in there, you can cause severe loss and damages. So we've created a product for off-spec carbon dioxide that completely takes that risk out of the contractual negotiations when you're negotiating from the original emitter of the carbon dioxide right through to the sequestration. This landscape is available on our website, the landscape that illustrates all these risks. It's free for absolutely anybody to use. Please take it, steal it, put your own logo on it. We don't care. We just want people to be thinking about insurance, about all of the dimensions, both of risk and the time horizons of the project, to see how, as an industry, we can get more projects through.
Right. Thank you. I think you're amongst friends, so you can be as geeky or technical as you like. Great. We're going to go to Rachel Deleuze next, who is going to talk about carbon capture.
Hi, it's Rukia. So yes, so I was going to talk about an insurance solution for carbon capture and storage that we, together with a couple of other peer insurers and a broker, developed. And this supported the creation of 2 high-profile carbon infrastructure projects in the UK. And actually, having this insurance was essential for these projects to get their carbon storage licenses, their permits, and also the final investment decision. So it really helped enable the projects to go ahead. So these 2 projects, one of is the North Endurance is in the northeast of the UK, and one is in the northwest. And they really are the industrial heartland of the UK. So and the projects have been financed through a public-private partnership. The UK government is taking a part of the risk, and then the energy firms BP, Equinor, Total take some of the rest of it. And it really is these are themselves the largest commercial sort of scalable carbon capture sort of transport and storage that will help the UK meet its net zero goals. So what actually happens in this process, in this insurance, is that the sort of plume, the emissions that are emitted in this area are taken. They are then taken into underground storage, a saline aquifer or a depleted reservoir, and that's where they're stored. The transport part of it involves onshore and offshore pipelines, and then there's an injection facility. It's complex stuff, and then the storage. And this is really, I guess, the special bit of the contract is that the storage, the containment risk of that this policy has then ensured for the next 10 years. So trying to understand the containment risk, the risk of remediation were it to leak, that is what has been underwritten to this policy. So that took a lot of head scratching. It was difficult. This had not been done before. And that's something that we with our sort of colleague firms embraced. So I think the key features of this insurance contract are, one, that it offered comprehensive coverage. It offered the physical risk coverage, the general liability, some loss of revenue. Then the second point being the custom nature of it, which is this the risk of seepage of the carbon that is then there for 10 years. That was difficult to do, not least because we as insurers rely a lot on reinsurance, and we've had to do that without our reinsurance. And then the third aspect is that it covers also some tax incentives. So the buyers, the insured, benefits from tax incentives, and were the project to fail, then they would lose out in that way. So the project indemnifies against that, or indeed replaces with carbon offsets. And then I think the fourth point, which I have heard in other sessions this morning, it's been formed by a group of trusted people. So trusted insurers with experience working together and taking risk. And I think that's what has to sort of be underpinning a lot of, if we're going to go in and expand an innovation in this way. And I think, in essence, what is interesting about both the project finance, the development of these projects, and indeed the insurance arrangement, is that both took innovation and collaboration. So the innovation and collaboration allowed the projects to happen with the UK government, with the energy companies, and goodness knows the players that will have been involved in that. And then insurers are used to collaborating. We co-insurers, you all know, most of the risks that we underwrite. So that collaborating with colleagues and brokers is what gets these things off the ground. And indeed, the project, in fact, we and 2 other insurers and the broker won Sustainable Insurance Initiative of the Year this year with that project, partly because of the good collaboration and indeed the innovation. So yes, I'm hoping that can be expanded further.
Thank you. And you might be wondering what Munich Re is doing on a City of London panel, but they are a very much welcome part of the City of London insurance family. And Tobias Grimm is here today to talk a little bit about how we are ensuring new technology so that it can be used in climate change.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite here for that panel. Highly appreciate it. When I was asked to present Munich Re's perspective, to showcase what kind of product have we have we deployed to the markets where we can showcase something on climate adaptation and mitigation? I always came back to the green tech solutions part. That's something where we have gained lots of momentum in the market and experience with lots of technological players and OEMs, project developers, investors, and also the banking side. What we have done is already now 16 years ago in 2009, we thought about and to what extent can we expand the frontiers of insurability, right? That's always something insurers strive to do, thinking about what's next, can we take kind of risks onto our balance sheet that we have not done so in the past. And with new technologies, we considered that, and we ended up in offering a first type of a performance warranty insurance to OEMs of solar photovoltaic modules. And that was very successfully accepted by the market. And that's where we have rolled this out into the market. We started with solar. We contributed massively to the decline of the module prices globally, I would say. We have, over all types of technologies, in the meantime, 160 gigawatt insured on our balance sheet in 2,800 projects over these 16 years. And we have constantly tried to expand that knowledge. So taking on technological risks onto our balance sheet where we feel confident with, where we are able to underwrite that and expand it to other types of technologies. We came up with serial losses for wind turbines. We came up also with kind of performance warranty solutions for all types of batteries, for many types of batteries at least. We are taking drilling risks for geothermal power plant on a very regional basis. And most recently, we started to deploy for hydrogen players, so electrolyzer performance warranties as well. That's, of course, top of mind. But I mean, we cannot change the market quicker as the market does react. There are lots of barriers and obstacles why the green hydrogen market does not unfold as it could be. But we are, of course, ready to take on technological risks to an extent where we do feel confident with. And as a co-benefit, we helped also with that knowledge that we built up internally to build up also a pipeline on investments. So we have ramped up also equity and debt investments on Munich Re's balance sheet for all types of renewable energies. And we made use of that knowledge that we have gained also by insuring and by getting in contact with many OEMs and others in the market. So that's for us a co-benefit. We're doing that in close collaboration with the industry. So we're making site inspections. We're going to the OEMs and inspect their module, the wafer plants. So where these modules are being installed, we do that mostly, of course, in Asian markets. And I think that's something where we continuously want to expand that as the markets do develop and evolve.
Thank you. So Dame Angela, all of these products will be underpinned by some pretty sophisticated modeling and data sets. How is the UK government expanding and in fact, extending the reach of our insurers?
Thank you, Sammy. And first of all, let me say to you all, thank you very much for having me. I'm not an insurer, I'm a scientist. So I trained first as a mathematician and I worked as a biologist for about 30 years before joining the UK Civil Service as a science advisor. So my job is to make sure that my government has access to excellent science advice every time it makes a decision. I'm actually particularly pleased to be here because I'm very optimistic about how all of the innovation and others of the type that you describe from your fantastic industry can really help us think ahead to what's already here with the climate change we're already seeing, and it's coming down the road. And I wanted to think a bit about climate adaptation, actually. In fact, every year I choose a particular topic that I focus on for that year, as well as all the other work we do. And my topic this year is, in fact, climate adaptation. So developing resilience to the climate change that we're already seeing and the further climate change that we know is coming. If you work in the UK government at the moment, anything you say, the first thing you must say is, I think this can drive growth in the following way. And that's very good. It drives us all to think about not just things we need to spend money on, but ways we can make them into the sorts of products you're describing. I'm really hopeful that given sort of two profound skill sets that exist, partly in London, of course, also in other places, we can make some real inroads in really in better modelling of hazard prediction. And those two deep sort of wells of skill are yours. So in identifying exposure and vulnerability to hazards, and so, which of course, I mean, lots of people have skills in risk analysis, but nobody has skills in risk analysis like insurers do. And then on the other side, the deep expertise that exists in the UK system in weather and climate modelling. And I think those are two reflections of what I call being a great data nation. I mean, we just take data very, very seriously, always have done. And so when we spend time talking to people, asking people, well, we've got to do climate adaptation, a lot of it's going to be very expensive. Where are the opportunities to generate prosperity? That is one of the best examples we've seen. So it's to bring together your expertise, some government expertise, I'm talking particularly about the Met Office, but also government data sets, in order to do really simple thing, which is better hazard prediction. Because better hazard prediction, better risk model, better pricing. So that's really the main place where for me, my community and your community, I think could come together to make a slightly different kind of new product from what you were describing, which is fascinating to hear about, in order to manage better in the changing climate that is here already and is going to change further soon.
Thank you so much. Okay, my turn to ask a few questions. For each panelist, is there a policy intervention or a decision coming out of this week that you would like to see that would enable you to innovate further?
So definitely a policy change I'd like to see. Whether it's particularly being addressed this week, I don't know. But building on the points you made around adaptation, I worry that as much as we need to adapt to existing building stock, that we are still not building the right assets necessarily in the right places or the right infrastructure. And so I think there's a real need that we have better code, better building codes, and that's not UK specific, that's global. If I were to pivot to the US, and I don't see my US colleague in the room, my colleague from the US would say that in the US, 30% states have good codes that's well enforced, 30% have good codes that's poorly enforced, and 30% of states have neither. I don't know that to be true. But I would then add to that yesterday I was speaking on a panel and sticking in America with the incoming chair of the American Institute of Architects. And they published a study in 2022 looking at architects, contractors, and the developers' perspectives on climate resilience. And the architects know they're not building the right buildings. Only 15% of them felt that building to code was building in a climate resilient way. Of the contractors, it was about 60% of contractors thought that code was good enough. And it was about 80% of developers, the people with the money, felt that if they were building to code, then they were building an asset that was safe and reliable for future generations. And so my policy desire from an adaptation perspective is that we stop building things that we know aren't going to be what we need over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Right. Thank you.
I think I'd like two if I can.
You may.
One's sort of linked to Amy's. The first one is that the UK does not change, that it keeps going on its climate commitments, right? That we don't change. That is, and we go, if anything, we can be more aggressive. I think our leadership is outstanding. I think it's effective, and we must not back down from that. So I think that's the most important. And plus, it gives investors confidence, etc. It's a disaster when you start changing it as a government. They need as much commitment as possible. The second thing, on the subject of construction, so there is little really being done with insurance in terms of how much they can, through claims and rebuild, how much impact they can have in terms of lower carbon. There is not much incentive. It is quite difficult as an interested party to try and move that forward. So if there's any policy interventions that the UK government could do, so, and that probably comes back to building codes. So for example, we had a very good presentation not long ago from somebody an academic who'd done a study on why the Danish industry has been able to reduce its carbon costs by 40% of its construction. And they have a carbon sort of limit. They have a limit per square meter of how much carbon could go into construction. And that in itself brought down their carbon costs. And there was a question mark about whether in other jurisdictions, professional indemnity insurance could be a sort of limitation that way. And it was the sort of conclusion of the study was that it isn't. So I think our government should look hard at other good examples of where these things have happened effectively, because until it's in building codes and regs, it simply doesn't happen. The insurers will only pay out they will pay out and rebuild as per building codes. So I think that's what would really make a difference.
I actually considered to discuss on reliability of politics and consistency, these kinds of things, the usual ones that one might expect. But I think what resonates way more is what Amy already touched on, and thanks for that. I would like to echo that and go a little bit see from a bit of a different angle. We, as one of the leading reinsurers, we take notice that losses out of natural hazards are on the rise. They're rising massively. We have just published a new analysis prior to that COP30 right now, where we compared losses against the income in various industrialized countries. And we see that even after that indexation, losses are still on the rise. And the main reason for that is not climate change. Climate change is an amplifier. Climate change exacerbates physical risks, but the main driver for increasing losses is that we still, as of today, develop new assets and properties in high-risk areas globally. There was just a new report published by the Geneva Association, the world's insurance think tank, Safeguarding Home Insurance, highly recommendable. We contributed to that massively as well. And it is nicely outlined here that some examples, Los Angeles wildfire earlier this year, the main losses happened in these wildland urban interfaces where people move out of the cities into these dangerous wildland areas. We still, as of today, develop new areas in floodplains, in coastal areas, those areas that are highly vulnerable. And that's something that we need to raise the awareness, the consciousness amongst politicians, but also into the societies and communities. We have lots of already existing properties, but we should start just discontinue developing new properties in these high-risk areas. I think that's also adaptation where we can do something on the long term that is very effective. But on that, I would favor to have kind of a publicly available natural hazard zoning system where everyone can have a look to what extent am I exposed to various natural hazards. I think that could move the needle. In some markets, we have that already existing. In some others, we are still lacking on that, but that's a progress that I would like to see.
Thank you. Dame Angela, is there a decision you're hoping will come out of COP? Is there anything that you're looking policy-wise to happen?
I mean, I would recommend, I would reiterate what Rachel said, continued commitment to the net zero promises we've already made. I mean, that's the fundamental thing, I would say.
Thank you.
If I could just go on, it's so interesting to hear you talking about what you need from government. And I agree, this issue, just stick to the guns. Don't change our minds. But of course, that's a political decision, not a civil service decision. But and therefore very important. And then the other was about policies. And actually, I think one of the things government can offer is convening power. And I would love to invite you to come and talk to my colleagues who are responsible for delivering 1.5 million new homes in the UK over the next 5 years. And I would love for you to come and have a pretty tough discussion with them about where they should be built now so that they are insurable in 20 years' time. Because I think that's absolutely vital. Because I completely agree, there's no point in building houses now that are going to be at best uninsurable and at worst uninhabitable in the not too distant future. So that's one of the things I would love to offer. The other thing I'd love to offer is data sets paid for with government funding. So we have the climate scenarios, we have the Environment Agency's flood maps, which are both for now and for, I think it's not far into the future, but for the future. And of course, we have the LiDAR data that tells you how low or high all the land is. And if there are other data sets you need that we have, come talk to us. Come talk to us about as I said before, I think we should think of ourselves as a great data nation, and data is only useful when it's shared, really. So we're very, very keen to keep pushing that agenda forward, and that's one part of working together. So we recognise your profound expertise. We're very keen to work with you, and as I say, please come help us. Because argue for the future.
And what can we offer from the UK in terms of international collaboration around data sets?
Thank you. That's a very good point. Thank you for that. Was a very parochial answer. I think the point I would focus on would be filling in the data gaps in international settings. So we collect nice data for our local weather forecasts, but there are large chunks of the world where the data is holding the weather forecasting back. And the WMO is already has a scheme to start to fill those gaps in, and we would tremendously support that. So that will make most difference in the local the places around, the places that sort of sit in the data gap. But actually, they will make better climate models are better for everybody.
Thank you. And if you can indulge me in the question around what is helpful about the UK environment in terms of promoting innovation, what is it that we can share with other colleagues that makes innovation possible in the insurance landscape?
I think Rachel really nailed the answer when she talked about the innovation that happened in London. London's a really unique marketplace. So much of it still happens in person. And there's a perception, I think, in some market that it's hugely inefficient to have a broker walking around with we call the contract slips, to have a broker walking around with their slipcase under their arm, transacting deals. The reality is that if I needed to go and place $1 billion of risk in an afternoon, I can only do that in London because I don't have to rely on an email. I can go and stand over Rachel or Tobias until they put ink on my page. But that proximity and the intellectual capital we have in that very small square mile makes collaboration actually far easier when we're often talking with our frenemies, our people that we have friendly competition with, that we need to collaborate to get things done. So I think that I'll let the insurers talk about the regulation if there are other things, but I think the physical space of London itself is what enables such amazing innovation.
Yeah, and I think if it would be quite good to look at my company as a sort of example of that. So my company was created in 2019, so it's 6 years old. It's underwritten 6 billion of revenue this year, and in a recent capital restructure valued at 7 point something billion. And it was started by two founders who had a long history, proven history in the insurance world. Thus, they were able to raise a significant amount of capital to start it. But I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where you could launch an insurance business and allow it to grow to the extent of $6 billion of revenue in such a short time with a very robust financial regulator. So I think the combination of London being a finance hub, as Amy described, it's absolutely the insurance hub, and the robustness of the regulator is what enables that to happen. So then we're able to do the innovation that underwrites the carbon capture storage or whatever it is. So I think that London's it is probably the strongest in that way, but there are others. But I would say enabling insurance businesses to thrive is really important from whichever jurisdiction you're in. And there are sort of quite good examples of where, if we think about climate risk, where the insurance world, the UK insurance world has been quite proactive. So we have a very good, we have something called Flood Re, which particularly takes flood risk, and it was put in place because there were areas that were becoming uninsurable, unaffordable for people to insure. And how that works is it's worked by the cost of the insurance is basically spread across all of us, but those with, and it was underpinned initially by the UK government, but it charges premiums. Everyone in the UK pays a small amount for that, but those with the greater flood risk pay more, right? But it is capped. But interestingly, to your point about we should stop building or we shouldn't be building where they are, from what I understand, it covers up to a certain date. So properties built beyond that date are not covered under it. So that's quite a sort of sensible way of saying we will deal with the risk, but we've got to be sensible about where we're building and how we're building. And my other example in this vein is within Lloyd's, there's something called a Lloyd's Lab, and sort of nascent entrepreneurial businesses can sort of be sandboxed through Lloyd's Lab, and they're quite often they're sort of climate related or innovation related businesses there. So I think I think London is a thriving place, and great because insurance has a huge amount to offer in terms of effective transition and resilience against climate change.
And maybe to add here, so it's not too easy for me to discuss that since I've never worked in London personally. I've been there several times. But just as you talked about Flood Re, I think that's something we are dealing a lot with various NatCat schemes. So insurance schemes, public-private schemes globally, how can we close the insurance protection gap? And Flood Re, at least some elements, can really be seen as a role model globally for others. It's not one by one scalable because every market has its own specifics, but Flood Re I like a lot. So at least some elements on the resilience and on the fixed date of getting into the pool or not is really something that can be taken for others as well. I worked for a few years in Sydney, Australia, and I was always told that Sydney is kind of the little London, right? And I can really echo that you immediately bump into cedents, into brokers, into insurance association colleagues, into the regulators. So having all of that at one place, and I can really understand how it is to work in London and to it's the global hub for the insurance connected ecosystem globally with all the capital strength, with a progressive regulator. So at least that's my perspective. I live in Munich, in Germany. We are alone in Munich, next to Allianz, of course, but other than that, we don't have anyone where we can just quickly interact. But of course, we do that in today's world a bit differently, all of that via Teams and other media. But I can understand very well why London is seen as the global hub for innovation also in the climate space.
Rachel and Amy, we have to get Tobias to London office, don't we? Yeah, I think that's going to be our goal after today. So I have one more question, but before we do that, I thought, Luciana, we'd ask the crowd if they have any questions for our UK-based insurers. Okay, no worries. Last question. I really, really hope we do Insurance House at COP31, and you have given us a fantastic idea. I hope that whoever hosts COP31 takes it forward. To my panel, if we were sitting on the stage in a year's time, what would you hope have happened? That could be something in the policy world, it could be something in your own business, or something in the marketplace generally. What do you want to see happen in a year?
I really want to cheat like Rachel did and do more than one, but I won't.
Your turn.
Before I answer that question, can I say something I would have liked to have said in the prior answer,
Please.
and then I'll come on to that. I didn't really talk enough about talent. And talent in London, it's really important that we invest in talent, but with all of our markets, we need to build our insurance talent. And I don't think we do a good enough job of making this industry something that young people leaving college are excited to join. We have such cool jobs, marrying deep technical, scientific expertise, financial acumen, interpersonal skills. And I think all of us have a responsibility to really make sure that we're consistently boosting our talent pipeline. So I wish I'd said that in the prior answer. So to answer this question with one, I think there are lots of asks. I think if we stick with the adaptation theme, it really has to be for the evolution of our understanding of resilience interventions. If we had, you laid out at the beginning, we were talking about commercial insurance. If we were talking about homeowners in particular, we'd have a lot of people who felt very vulnerable because they weren't able to insure their largest single investment, or they were struggling to afford to insure their largest single investment. We know that nobody invests without access to insurance, that things need to be insurable from a hazard perspective. And so what I would really like is in 12 months' time that we have a consistent way of talking about the return on investments of resilience interventions to give a really clear financial incentive to homeowners, to house builders, to businesses to make those investments in resilience. I would add to that slight sheet is that including not just the hard engineering measures, but the nature-based solutions that can really provide amazing defenses to our built environment and to be able to price those so they're factored into underwriting and ultimately to ROIs. Thank you.
Yes, I think I'd want our government and actually any governments to really pump up how they can, through either sovereign wealth funds, how they can give catalytic capital to public-private finance projects. I think there's so much going to be needed, both for climate resilience and transition, both in the developed world and the emerging markets. And I think there is a lot of capital, private capital out there, but it does need working with governments to catalyze it. So if they can double what they're doing, but I think that's the one thing that I would think would really make a big shift and difference, with a very targeted ambition of what it's trying to achieve. And indeed, talking to the insurers world plenty about that, because we sit on 40% of the world's assets. We are big assets investors. We can be used in that way. I think that discussion needs to happen more.
Regarding next year, COP31, let's see where it will be. Any news on that already? I don't know. But if we think about, we come together in a year's time, I would say twofold. The one is having on the climate resiliency piece, we often discuss about kind of public-private risk-sharing frameworks and encouraging and enabling governments and multilateral development banks to take over the first loss tranche. That's something that enables us as an insurer, as a private market player, to take over and underwrite the technical risk where we do feel confident with. Seeing more of these examples, building up the track record, that would be really valuable. And the second point I would like to make is, as I already mentioned briefly before, is narrowing the protection gap. We still, as of today, in the less developed world, have a massive protection gap. Just recent numbers on the flood last year in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil indicate that some 95% of all losses were not insured. So that's something that to me is not acceptable. That we can do a lot more on that. And I hope that we will see kind of progress in many of these not very well established markets going forward, that we can change something here and increase the protection gap or reduce the protection gap and take more onto our balance sheet, because we have everything. We have the data, we have the underwriting expertise. So that's something where we can organically grow easily.
Thank you. Dame Angela, is there something you'd like to see by COP31?
Yeah, I would like to see whole days of this kind of conversation. So, closer collaboration between the public sector that has very ambitious plans for building that needs to be done in a way that is not vulnerable. And we have a lot of data and some expertise, but I think a collaboration between your deep expertise in risk analysis and the plans we need to make, perhaps the information we can offer in exchange would be a terrific thing for us to try and do in the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Luciana's let me know that we have a question from the crowd. Oh, the mic is there, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Luca. I'm still a student. I'm an intern at the French-Brazil Chamber of Commerce. And my question is concerning adaptation measures. In a study that I was doing in university, I saw that states like Florida, they have a partnership between the government and insurers that provide lower premiums for infrastructures that have adaptation measures against extreme climate events. And I was wondering if in London, there is the same partnership between the government and insurers to incentivize the private sector to adapt their infrastructures to prevent loss and damages, especially concerning enterprises that have a lot of that sometimes stop their operations because of damage from extreme climate events. One example is the Ford factory here in Brazil, the Toyota factory, sorry, that stopped their operations 1 month ago because of extreme storm in São Paulo, and they delayed their starting date for a new product. So that's my question. Thank you very much.
That one. Amy is the. Yeah.
I'm happy for Tobias too. The answer is most definitely yes. The underwriters underwrite the risk. But what we aren't always consistently doing is explaining those resilience measures. So underwriters in a floodplain area, absolutely, if you can demonstrate that the floor elevation is higher, that the building type is more robust, can price that into that model. Underwriting information isn't always granular enough for that to happen. For homeowners, I'm going to let Tobias, I don't know if you have a perspective. I spend most of my time in the commercial world, but for homeowners in particular.
I mean, for homeowners, we always have the challenge that they are unaware how to improve and how to better their buildings. And to what extent it really pays off when they invest into a betterment of the buildings. Does it really pay off then accordingly? We are part of the IBHS in the US, the insurance business of home safety. They are doing lots of testings, how to improve building codes in the US, and then transfer that into the industry and help and make that knowledge also accessible to the markets there. I think that's something that is highly appreciated in the US, but US has lots of pitfalls and things to consider. And as you mentioned, Florida, that's a critical state where that affordability topic in the US has gained lots of momentum, but there are lots of repairs have been undertaken to fix the market again and get people back into affordable insurance, and also the primary carriers back into the game, because lots of primary carriers have left the market due to lots of system failures. But I think there's a lot going on at the moment positively that this market will be repaired.
Thank you for your question. I hope you're going into the insurance industry once you're done your studies. Okay, that's me. I'm plugging your point. Our time, unfortunately, is up. Thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you very much to my panelists for showcasing Team UK, and to my CNseg colleagues, and to all the Brazilian insurers and any other insurers in the world. The UK is here to work with you. There was such a lovely quote as we walked in that insurance is the stamp and the passport to the future. We're here to be your partner in making that stamp. So we regularly welcome CNseg into every June. They come and work with our Association of British Insurers, so the equivalent of CNseg in the UK. And we're also having in London this year a Global Risk Summit in May. And we have been issued an invite to CNseg to join us next May in London, and all of you as well. If anybody would like to hear more about that, I'm here to talk about that. Thank you so much, and have a great COP. Here.
Thank you so much, everyone. Muito obrigado a todos. Teremos agora um breve intervalo. Voltaremos com o Fórum de Clima, Vida e Longevidade, Previdência e Segurança Financeira como aliadas no desenvolvimento sustentável.
Tá pra Bruna, não?
Go. Retomando a nossa programação, vamos dar início ao Fórum de Clima, Vida e Longevidade, Previdência e Segurança Financeira
now
como
start the
aliadas no
next
desenvolvimento
forum
sustentável.
of this
O objetivo
afternoon.
deste painel é explorar como as novas abordagens, parcerias e instrumentos financeiros
Climatic
podem
transition
transformar
and
os desafios da
population of aging
longevidade
implique
do
social
clima
economics
em
for the
oportunidade
future.
para o
How we can
Brasil
make this into
avançar na
opportunities for
direção de
Brazil
país
to
mais
advance in the
resiliente,
direction of a more
inclusivo e
resilient, inclusive,
sustentável.
and sustainable
Para abrir
country.
esta
To
tarde,
open this
convido o
afternoon,
presidente
I
da
invite
CNseg,
the president
Diogo
from
Oliveira.
CNseg, Diogo Oliveira.
Alô, boa tarde.
Hello, good afternoon. I thought they were going to ask Edson to come over here. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. As you have realized, I am 100% in COP spirit. I did a reforestation of my hair here, as you can see. And I would like to thank everyone for having come here, for the support of our sponsors, our partners here at Casa do Seguro, the insurance house, and the panelists who will be part of this panel. You will certainly be inspired by Newton Molina, who is like a headlight to guide us, and the contributions of all the other panelists as well. Professor Paulo Artacho, I hope he will do what he did to me, which was to scare me, to leave me a little more worried than I used to be. I hope we all live here more worried but more active, proactive on this theme. And the theme of today sprang from our debates on CNseg, because we thought that longevity is highly impacted by climate change, and we weren't inserting that in the first agenda. It sprang from the debates that we had, the talks that we had, and I think it is a theme that hasn't been treated adequately here at COP. What are the impacts that climate change has on longevity? Molina used to say, said a while ago, that longevity has a great amount of luck, but we have to help this luck. So to bring this debate here connected with the theme of climatic change is one way of helping luck, what we call luck. So I wish you all a great event. The interpreting booth explains that we are no longer receiving the sound. We hope it will be back soon. It's back now. So this helped us to set up this place. Margarete, the president of Sincor, our dear Betty, president of the Commercial Association of Pará, supporters of the sector, who will help us speak out of our bubble, open the space for insurance in other sectors of the economy, which is the objective of insurance at COP. Talk about it beyond our boundaries, taking our solutions and the difficulties as well that we have to overcome to be able to follow the agenda and the needs of this new society in a more sustainable environment. Okay, for me not to stay here longer, I wish you all an excellent panel, and I thank you very much for having come here today. Thank you very much.
Diogo Oliveira, presidente do CNseg, muito obrigado.
Diogo Oliveira, thank you very much for your contribution. Now I invite onto the stage the president of FENAPREV, Edson Franco. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Well, because of the rain, those who are here are, those who aren't, it will take a little longer. Okay, here the rain has a time to begin and a time to finish. Okay, so now contextualizing what Diogo has started talking about. I arrived here on Sunday, and one of the things that I have heard a lot is that this is the COP of pragmatism, action. Instead of just continuing making promises, this is the COP of implementation. And implementation goes, in my opinion, through the interconnection between the theme environment, social, and economic. The discussion has to stop being only technical, a silos type of discussion. I
vários especialistas
I
em
spent some
sustentabilidade.
time with many specialists in
Tem
sustainability,
momentos que a sopa de
and there
letrinhas e
are
de
moments
siglas
when the
é
amount of
tamanha que a gente não
acronyms
consegue
is
acompanhar
so
o
much that
raciocínio.
we cannot
A gente
follow
tem
the
que ser
reasoning.
realmente mais
So we have to
didático
be
e
more
mais
didactic,
pragmático.
more
A
pragmatic,
integração das
and the
temáticas é
integration of
fundamental.
these
A
themes
temática
are
ambiental,
really
eu não vou
important.
me alongar aqui,
The
porque o professor
environmental
Paulo
one, I
Artacho,
won't take you
como o
long
Diogo já
because
falou,
Professor Paulo Artacho
discorrer
will
longamente sobre o tema.
talk about that.
Mas uma coisa que é muito
But
importante
one
que a
thing
gente
that
diga é
is
que
really important that should be
55% ou
said
58%,
is
enfim, tem vários
that
números aí, do PIB mundial
50% or
depende de
58%
recursos naturais
depends
e de
on
serviços
natural
ecossistêmicos. Isso
resources and
representa 58
ecosystemic
trilhões
services.
de
This
dólares.
represents $58 trillion.
Na América Latina,
And in
as
Latin
perdas
America,
estimadas
the
até
losses, the
2050
estimated losses up
são
to
de
2050
257
are
bilhões de
around
dólares,
$257
sendo que
million.
disso
And
70%
70% of
184
that,
bilhões de dólares,
$184
vem do
billion,
Brasil.
comes from Brazil.
Então, em função de recursos
So,
naturais, minerais,
due to
agricultura,
natural
enfim, que
resources,
requerem
agriculture that
ecossistemas
demand
funcionando
ecosystems which work
no
well
que se convencionou chamar de
in
economia
what we
azul, né?
called
Principalmente
blue
aquilo que depende
economy,
da água.
mostly what
Nesse
depends on the
contexto,
water.
é que
In
nós
this
também
context,
trazemos o tema
we
da
also bring the
longevidade.
theme
A
of
expectativa de
longevity.
vida nos
The
últimos 100
life
anos,
expectancy in the
ela
past
dobrou.
100 years
Em
has
função de
doubled
avanços
due
científicos,
to scientific
sanitários e
advances,
ambientais, mas avanços que
environmental ones, but
dependem da
also
integridade da
advances that
natureza.
depend on the
Água,
integrity of
saneamento,
nature,
produção estável de
water,
alimentos, controle de
sanitation,
doenças
production
infecciosas,
of
clima
food,
estável, controle de
control of
poluição
infectious
extrema. A
disease, control
saúde
of
humana
pollution. The
é
human health
subproduto da
is a
saúde ecológica.
byproduct of ecological
Saúde
health.
humana, animal e ambiental são
All these healths
inseparáveis.
are
Mas,
inseparable.
ao mesmo tempo, a
But at
questão
the
da
same time,
longevidade, por melhor que
longevity,
seja a notícia, né,
even though we
ela
have the best
traz,
news, it
combinada
seems,
com a redução da natalidade,
combined
principalmente,
with the reduction of
ela
nature,
traz uma pressão fiscal.
it also brings a fiscal
60% dos
pressure.
gastos federais,
60%
se
of the
considerar estados e
federal
municípios,
expenses,
são,
regardless
são
of states and
alocados em
municipalities,
previdência e pessoal
they
no
are
Brasil.
allocated
A
in
função
pensions.
proteção social
The
nas
function
três esferas,
social
federal, estadual,
protection,
municipal,
federally, state
chega
level
a
or municipal level
16,8% do PIB.
leads to
Se nada for
16.8%
feito,
of the
essa
GDP.
pressão
If
adicional
nothing is
só
done,
na questão
this
social
extra
vai
pressure
adicionar mais 8
will add
pontos
more
percentuais a essa
eight,
conta
eight
nos
more
próximos
points
25 anos,
in the
até
next
2050,
25 years until
fazendo com que
2050,
esse número
making
alcance
this
25%
number
do
reach
PIB.
25% of the
Se nós
PIB.
somarmos
If
os
we
custos
add
de
the
infraestrutura,
costs for
de
infrastructure,
adaptação,
for
aumento da
adaptation,
resiliência
for the
climática,
increase of
de
climate
prevenção em
resilience and
saúde,
prevention in health
decorrentes das mudanças
due to the
climáticas,
climate
essa conta
changes,
pode ficar
this can add
impagável.
up to an
A
amount that is
política
not
fiscal,
possible to pay.
ela vai ter que
So the
equilibrar
fiscal policy
duas frentes
will have to
simultaneamente:
balance
o
two fronts,
envelhecimento humano
the
e o
aging
envelhecimento ambiental
and
do planeta.
the human
A
aging and
pergunta
the
para o debate, já
environmental aging.
antecipando o que nós
So
vamos
just
falar depois
anticipating what we will say
da sua palestra, professor,
after your
qual
lecture,
é o
Professor,
papel
is
de
what is
seguros
the
nisso
role of
tudo? Em
insurances
país que tem
in all
gap de
that? In
proteção
a country
securitária,
where we
como o
have
Brasil,
a secondary
nos
gap
cabe
in terms of protection.
não só aumentar o
So
alcance da
we
cobertura
have to
securitária,
increase
mas
the
também desonerar o
coverage
Estado.
for insurance, but also we have to
Nesse
help the
domingo,
state.
eu vi uma
So
luz no
this
fim do túnel.
Sunday, I saw light at the
Vocês
end of
sabem
the
qual foi o
tunnel.
tema da
You
redação do
know what
Enem
was the
na
theme
prova de
of
domingo?
ENEM, which is the national
Desafios do
evaluation?
envelhecimento
It is
populacional no
challenges
Brasil,
of
né?
aging,
Nós temos,
population
pelo
aging in
menos,
Brazil.
nesse momento,
We have at
4
this
milhões
moment
e
at least
800 mil
4 million
jovens que
and
foram
800,000
forçados
youngsters
a
who had
refletir
to
sobre esse tema.
reflect about
Achei
that.
uma ótima
I
introdução
thought
para
it
o painel de
was
hoje.
excellent for
Obrigado
the
e bem-vindos
panel
a
of
todos.
today. Welcome.
Muito obrigado ao
Thank
presidente da
you, FENAPREV's president, Edson
Agora, o
Franco.
tema é transição
Now the
climática
theme
e
is climate
envelhecimento
transition and
populacional.
populational aging, socioeconomic implications for the future. To present this theme, I invite onto the stage the scientist and member of the Intergovernmental Commission, Paulo Atacho. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope this will be an informal panel. I think the more informal it is, the more interesting it is, but I enjoyed very much the introduction which has been done about the economic impacts of the climatic changes and the incredible challenge that the society will have to face due to that. So basically, this is the theme of the discussion of this presentation, and essentially, if I can change the slide here, and in fact, this graph illustrates a little about the theme that was asked in the national evaluation, what's happening in Brazil. So basically, here on this curve here, you can see the longevity, which is expected up to 2100. And on the right is the age pyramid of the Brazilian society, where we see an enormous transformation. But there is a very important detail in these issues. Europe has also been through a similar process, but slower, more slowly. Brazil is doing this process much faster. And therefore, the difficulty in adapting, the difficulty in the market, teaching, and so on and so forth, while here it will be much harder than what Europe faced. And there are important impacts in many aspects for the insurance sector for obvious reasons. Okay, the World Meteorological Organization published an article in Lancet showed that climate changes are one of the biggest threats to health, public health in this century for a number of reasons, not just because of higher temperature, the increase of the sea level, the increase of climatic events, but also due to alterations in the distribution of vectors which cause a number of diseases, stress due to heat, the impact on the quality of the water, the increase of burning or fires, which will take pollution to remote areas, and so on and so forth. So the Brazilian society as a whole has to effectively have clear strategies of how we are going to deal with health in this new climate that we have nowadays. And these climate effects in human health, they have many different parameters. What is important, they are interrelated. They are not independent among themselves. So the proliferation of vectors will depend on rain, temperature, climate degradation, the change of land use, heat waves, all related to the increase of pollution in the air due to the higher emission, higher temperature, and so on and so forth. So you can see that the great challenge is that science knows very little yet about these interactions. Some people work on dengue, some people work on the impact of heat, but the interactions among these components, they are equally important. To deal with that, the World Health Organization structured the concept of health, where the health of the environment, so the ecosystem's health, like the one in the Amazon, socials, lands, oceans, forests, they had to be combined with the health of animals, of wildlife, production, animals for protein, but also pets and so on, together with the health of humans as a whole. This includes individual, collective, and health and well-being. So just a systemic view, which is integrated, will be able to help us structure robust mechanisms to be able to deal with the climate changes and their impacts on the health as a whole. And talking a little bit about climate change, COP30 is only occurring because of this graph. This graph is the gas emissions since the 90s until 2023, showing that the greenhouse effect gas emissions, in spite of the 29 COPs that have occurred before, and in spite of the 50 years from the Stockholm conference where science alerted humanity, something is not doing well with the Earth atmosphere. We are emitting 57 billion tons of greenhouse effect gas onto the atmosphere every year. This is a very deep alteration in the composition of the atmosphere, and this alteration can be reflected in the concentration of carbon dioxide, methane, nitric oxide, which are the main gases of greenhouse effect. We have increased the concentration of CO2 in 52%, methane in 256% before the Industrial Revolution until now. And obviously, this has very important implications. The main sources are fossil fuels, 90% of the emissions, deforestation of forests like the Amazon, which is responsible for 10% of the emissions. 20 years ago, the deforestation of tropical forests was responsible for 22%, and we hope this will reach zero the fastest possible. But so what does it come down to? We are changing the composition of the Earth's atmosphere to gases which control the radioactive balance of the atmosphere, how much radiation comes in and how much comes out of the planet. This is the essence of the climate changes, and that's why we are here at COP30. The problem is that besides these emissions, we have been observing an acceleration of these emissions, where you see that in the 60s last century, the concentrations would increase 0.8 ppm a year. Nowadays, they increase 3.36 ppm a year. In other words, we are accelerating the climate change as a whole, and this has impacts. Atmosphere impacts in the oceans, in the ecosystems on Earth, and all these impacts can be seen in many different ways in this graph since the Industrial Revolution up to now. In other words, we are changing not just the atmosphere, but we are altering all the ecosystems which support us in this planet as a whole. Well, if we look now at those emissions and their impact on the temperature, this graph shows the average temperature in the globe in the 2024 years, and we are in that red dot over there. So we have reached the highest level along the last 125,000 years, the three last geological eras. So if we look again at the past 50 years, see what we have been doing with the average temperature of our planet. 2024, it is 1.55 degrees warmer than it used to be before the Industrial Revolution. But science has many details. This is the average temperature, but 75% of the country is water, ocean, and this water has a great thermal capacity. Translating it, the Earth ecosystems get warmer much faster than the global average. And then in continental areas, we have increased 2.1 degrees Celsius. And then people will ask about the Paris Agreement, and we will discuss that a little bit further on. But look at the growth after the 80s, the growth of temperature in the Earth ecosystems. That's why COP30 is strategic for the future of our planet. If we look at this film now, that shows every month since 1980 until 2024, the increase of temperature, you will see what happens after the 80s. Have a look there. It accelerates much faster until it reaches 2024 with 1.55 degrees of average increase in temperatures. Therefore, what we see is our changing climate is a deep process. Okay, but everything that I have said was from now backwards. What about the future? What is expecting us? That's why the Intergovernmental Panel builds models that represent the climate in the present, in the past, and in the future. An important question is the following. If we look at the projections of IPCC before the Paris Agreement, so 10 years ago, the projections indicated an increase of 4.3 degrees Celsius in the planet. Okay, you looked at the reports for IPCC dating back to 2012. They used to indicate that. And now, 10 years later, an increase, a forecast increase for the planet of 2.8 degrees. Of course, 2.8 degrees is much higher than 1.5, more than 2 degrees, but once again, what about the Paris Agreement? Did it work? Did it help the humanity to go through a more sustainable way? The clear answer is yes. We are in the right direction, but we need to accelerate. We need to move on so that we can get there. Okay, so basically, we are going towards there with the commitment of countries until 2035 to an increase of 2.8 degrees on average for the planet as a whole. No one lives on an average. What is very important is essentially how is the geographical distribution of this temperature increase occurs. So if we heat the planet 3 degrees Celsius, which is our trajectory at the moment, the increase in Brazil will be something about 4 degrees, 4.5 degrees. The increase in temperature in Siberia and Canada, something about 6 degrees to 7 degrees. So this is the commitment that we are making now with our with what's being approved here at COP30. It's important that we should mention that. So anyone who lives in Belém, Manaus, Palmas, Cuiabá can see the gravity of such an increase of 4.5 degrees Celsius on average, excluding the climate adverse events. So that's why we are here discussing ways for COP30. Climate. It's not just temperature. Climate is also rain. And what will happen to the rain? So along this process, if you look, all the central part of Brazil and the Amazon will become much drier, just like the south of Africa, the Mediterranean Europe, Spain and Portugal. We can already see deserts in an important way, Central America, drier, and the central part of the US. So the first important question is, how can this compromise our capacity of producing food for 10 billion people in 2050? And obviously, this may bring geopolitical tensions, which will be very important for the future of our planet. Okay, now let's talk about extreme climate events, which is a sector that impacts health. Essentially, this graph here from the Meteorological World Association shows a number of climatic events from the 80s of last century until now, and more recent data. You realize that they have multiplied it by 4. And there are physical reasons for that. An atmosphere which is warmer can retain more the liquor of the water without having it condense. So you will have much more water in the atmosphere and it falls down intensely, intensifying those events, climate events. All that is explainable through thermodynamics without any problem. And what is the future of those extreme adverse events? The climate models show that an event that used to happen every 50 years before the Industrial Revolution will occur 39 times more frequently and will be 5 times more intense if we warm the planet, if we heat the planet 4 degrees more. So if you have one heat wave that used to occur every 50 years, it will occur 39 times in these 50 years. So the main conclusion is it's better for us to get ready for these extreme adverse events, the increase in the frequency and intensity. And these extreme events have an enormous impact on human life. Recent papers which were published in Europe, for example, they show that heat waves in Europe in 2003 caused 70,000 deaths. In 2022, 60,000 people were killed in Europe. So there are very few statistics like that in Brazil. I'll show you some, but obviously you realize clearly the impact of that in human health and insurance sector as well. In Brazil, you see the heat wave since the 90s. It has been increasing significantly and extending not just in the Northeast, but also in the Southeast, where we have high population density. So this has important impacts, and we should realize that Brazil is a country that is vulnerable, very vulnerable to climate change. 2024 was the warmest year that we have ever had in Brazilian history. And you see the tendency of heat extremes increasing every year. And this, obviously, even if we reduce emissions now, this will continue in the future. This is an important detail. And in the case of Brazil, which is a humid country, just like here in Belém, so what happens? The heat waves are worsened by the high relative humidity of the air, because the mechanism that we have to be able to cool our body is to lose water. But if you have high humidity, the water that is in your skin has difficulty to cool your body. So the thermal sensation in a humid climate is much worse than in a drier climate. And this impacts strongly mortality rate. So if we look at thermal sensation versus humidity, air humidity, you will see that when you have high humidity, the danger zone starts at 30 degrees Celsius. So this is another peculiarity of our country that we have to think about and know about. A recent paper, which was done by the University of Rio de Janeiro, shows the impact of heat waves in metropolitan areas in Brazil, Belém, Manaus, Fortaleza, Recife, and so on. You will see that there has been an important change as of 2003 and 2006, with a worsening of the incidence of heat waves. And this work, using SUS data, has identified an increase of 48,000 deaths related to heat in these urban areas. It's not that in their death certificate people will say they died due to heat. No one will write that there. They died due to cardiovascular problems, dehydration, kidney failure. And you who understand these effects better than me, you will know that you won't have heat written on the death certificate, but we have created mechanisms, the government and Fiocruz, they have been able to identify these cases in particular. When there is a landslide here in Brazil, as occurred in Rio and São Sebastião, you have headlines. The number of dead people who have the number of casualties due to that accident, but many more people die of heat waves than due to these other adverse climate events. And also social inequality, right? This is a very highlighted in this data because poor and Black people die much more than the others, than the whites. So there's social injustice as well. 4 times more people die in that case. So another impact in health is the alteration in the disease transmission vectors, such as these diseases which are very much similar to, very much Brazilian, let's say. And you can see clearly that the more the globe is warm, the more you alter the pattern of these insects which transmit these diseases. I don't know if you have seen that, but some weeks ago in Iceland, they didn't have mosquitoes there, but now they already have it there too. So it's not just a Brazilian question. This will happen elsewhere as well, in many other countries. And it's important for us to highlight that the most vulnerable will always suffer the consequences more. So our children who live in São Paulo, if my daughter is short of breath, in 30 minutes she's having oxygen in a hospital and so on. But what about people who live 3 or 4 hours away from a doctor? They run a higher risk. They are more frail and fragile. And we have the obligation of thinking how we are going to help these populations which are not assisted by the health system as a whole. So I hope it has become clear that climate changes are certainly one of the biggest threats to public health in this century. Aging of the population makes it more difficult to adapt to this new climate that we will have to adapt, and the sooner we adapt, the better, the lesser will be the loss to society and to the population as a whole. And Brazil, due to its tropical location, is one of the countries which is mostly affected by climate change. I always say 4 degrees of increase here in Belém has a much higher impact than in Stockholm, in Montreal, in New York, which are cold places usually. So we had better look after the climate in an adequate way because we will pay more for that. Thank you for your attention. Okay, thank you very much, Paulo Atacho. He's a scientist, a member of the Governmental Panel for Climate Change. We will now go to the main panel, Insurance, Climate Change and Longevity. I invite onto the stage Vinícius Pinheiro from OIT, Director for Brazil for OIT. A round of applause for all our panelists, please. We'll also have Rui Alexandre Silva Esteves, Statistics Director and Technical Studies from Grupo Fidelidade. Also, Newton Molina, President of the Institute for Longevity of MAG. And Estevão Scriplit, Vida em Previdência. Antônio Rezende, Vice President for Prudential and FENAPREV. And Edson Franco, President of FENAPREV. This panel is being broadcast on Casa do Seguro and has simultaneous translation. I wish you all an excellent panel. Okay, Molina, you were the only one who really got a round of applause here. Okay, well deserved. Thank you very much, the panelists, for having accepted. Thank you for the invitation. Professor, what is missing is there is another important effect related to the increase of global temperature, which is change in the grapevine area. You are starting to have a change in that area as well. It's one more proof that there are concrete effects.
Eu não vou gastar muito mais tempo aqui na contextualização, porque eu acho que a gente já fez aqui a...
Okay, I won't spend any more time contextualizing this. I would just like to bring a reflection for me to try to get the thematics which are on sustainability and economic one and our role. And the main question that we have is how the insurance sector can actually have a protagonist role facing these issues.
E uma das coisas, tanto na questão patrimonial como
when we consider
de pessoas, eu acho
people, and the answer, I think, is in the increase, in the contribution that we can give to the increase of resilience.
de sermos simplesmente pagadores de
Instead of being
indenização,
just a
é a
payer
gente atuar
for
muito
indemnizations, I
mais
think
na
we can act much
prevenção,
more on the
na
prevention,
mitigação
in the
e, claro,
mitigation,
na
and of
reparação
course in the
quando
repair
o evento é inevitável.
when
Nós
the
sabemos
event
que a
is
morte é inevitável,
unavoidable.
mas
We know
nós
death is
podemos
inevitable,
também,
but
em
we
seguros de
can
pessoas,
also, in terms
atuar
of
muito
people's
fortemente
insurance,
no aumento
we can
da
act in the
resiliência
increase of
das
resilience
famílias no caso de uma
in
perda
case
prematura,
of
de uma doença
premature
grave, de uma
loss,
invalidez.
of
Então, para
real
colocar
bad accident, for
a bola
example.
em
So
jogo,
just to keep the ball
eu queria
rolling,
começar
I would
pelo
like to
Vinícius,
start with Vinicius
já com uma pergunta,
with
Vinícius,
a
sobre
question, Vinicius.
transição justa, né? A transição justa ela exige que o setor financeiro e o setor de seguros atuem como parceiros ativos da proteção social. Como que a OIT avalia o potencial, principalmente das seguradoras, do setor segurador, em promover a resiliência social e a estabilidade econômica nesse contexto de crise climática?
In this context.
Muito obrigado, Edson. Boa tarde a todos e a todas.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation.
A OIT, ela traz para esse debate.
OIP brings to this debate at COP30 exactly the advance, the need to advance in just transition. It's not a relatively new concept. We didn't used to hear that very much, but that Brazil included in the agenda. You have to include people in the center. At the beginning of the climate debate, it was associated to the image. Okay, so the melting of Mont Blanc, polar bear, which would be lost, but now it's the people who are suffering from chemical thermal stress. In this climate transition, it has been followed by the demographic transition, like the professor dealt with, and the other one is the technological one. We have a technological transition which saves workforce, which modifies the work relations, it creates more people who are working on their own, but who do not exactly contribute individually. And so pensions are affected by that. This aligned with rapid aging, was creating a time bomb that aligned with the new risks of climate transition, changed the profile of risk.
Dessa transição relacionados precisamente à saúde e segurança
This is more related to work safety. Nowadays, we see that climate has changed. The numbers are here. So you have an increase, like Professor said, what happens when you work 3, 4, 5 degrees above.
E aí nós estamos falando 70% da população mundial que está
exposta. We are talking about,
né? Que basicamente todo mundo trabalha fora do ar-condicionado. Então é o coração, os rins, os pulmões, a pele, né? E a cabeça, né? Então isso implica, por exemplo, um dos benefícios que mais cresce hoje no seguro social
increases more and more is help for diseases. So even though the government tries to make up for it, to connect with specialist doctors and so on, there are more and more people who are ill, demanding for pensions due to diseases. So these transitions, digital transition, environmental transition, and demographic transitions, they create a need of better cooperation in reformulating the insurance models. I don't know if Mr. Molina remembers, I was a secretary for Fernando Henrique Cardoso, and the reform that we did at that time, we had a deficit of 0.9% of the GDP. Now it's 0.4. So there hasn't been an advance in terms of protecting an insurance that would actually protect the risks which were emerging at the time. And now the society is paying the bill. So it's important to go deeper into the reforms that need to be done in Brazil, tax reform and also retirement reform as well, the distribution of risks, but that will confront these three transitions, the demographic, technological, and environmental. Thank you, Vinicius. The theme that you have brought in the work relations, this brings a further problem because it accelerates the process, the collapsing process in the insurance systems, because less people contribute to the system and more people, and the relationship between those who are beneficiary and those who are contributing is changing. So we are already saying that in 3 decades, we will be near to 3 to 1 or 1.5 to 1 when we consider those who are contributing and those who are receiving pensions from the government. Besides, this will be certainly a big problem. And there is a role for this class of workers who are underprotected socially. I think that Antonio, within the theme that is being discussed here, Antonio, I think not just with regards to what you said about the population and climate change, this notion of financial protection and Prudential being a specialist in people's insurance, how do you see the role of the life insurance in this climate risk scenario? But I would include as well in this question this issue of this new model of work market, mostly for people of low income. Thank you, Edson. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to work on this event as a vice president of Prudential and a director of Senaprev. It's wonderful to be here in this event at the Casa do Seguro. The insurance companies, they know risks, they know the root causes, they have metrics for short, mid, and long-term risks, and it should be included in, it should have been included since COP1, but we are in COP30. The competence of the insurance at the macroeconomic level, understanding risk, and how to present efficient solutions for dramas which we are going to, not just in the climate situation, that is a worsening, of course, of the socioeconomic problems, geopolitical problems as well, that we already have as an element at the moment. So this is a good moment for us to be talking about insurance and the potentials of change. So it's a pleasure to be here talking about that. Now, regarding these questions, it's dramatically important considering the protection gap that we have here in Brazil and in society as a whole. But above all, understanding the aspect of insurance as a leverager for economic growth, because the economic condition is a precondition to solve structural problems in the country. And insurance is one of the economic leverages of GDP. If you study the input, the matrix for input, for productive chains, for every 1 billion reais which is hired in life insurance, there is an increment of 1.5 billion in the national GDP. There is a generation of 500 million, I'm sorry, 500 million in taxes and an even higher capacity of the insurance sector to create the macroeconomic conditions so that society can use the resources for problems that we face. And the other point is the capacity to transform risks of climate change in financial protection for the population. A quick reflection about insurance. It's a tool to look after people, look after the future. What grows the most here in Brazil has been the coverages for that, the hospitalizations, the loss of income, and tropical diseases. So the insurance doesn't have that classical view that my family only will be protected, but it creates tools of protecting people against the uncertainties of climate. This is the most important one. So, is to think of the modalities, the avenues from growth, to be able to fulfill this gap, this protection gap. Only 10% of the population has a protection. 70.5% has some sort of insurance protection. So this level of exposition is high, and this protection, of course, is related to classes A and B, not really C and D. So a people's protection insurance increases the possibility of the society to be resilient to things such as the floods, typhoons in Paraná. It is of interest of the society as a whole to be able to check the level of protection which is possible to provide so that society can do advances in terms of protection. The insurance may have a transforming purpose. It takes financial protection to different phases of life, but also protecting Brazilians who are more vulnerable. And the climate risk is direct because it affects the savings accounts of people. When we don't have any safeguard of protection, this effect is more dramatic because the capacity for protection is reduced. So therefore, if you think of a country where you have people's insurance advancing action to restructure itself. So why is it important in this situation here? We had damage insurance improvements, property insurance improvements, but people's insurance products need to be the tool that will do the protection in at the global level. There are few experiences, but in Brazil, we need to advance in terms of regulations. When I'm talking about regulations, I'm talking about simplifications and reductions of taxes, because tax will not lead to an increase in penetration. You don't have to be a specialist in tributes for you to understand the effect is the opposite, like quite the opposite. And another important example is that people's insurance is reinventing itself. The people's insurance has simplification tools with easier technological basis and massification. They are insurances which have less, let's say, lead to less protection, but they are still more comprehensive. More people have it. So if we don't have massification, the level of penetration for insurance in Brazil would be even lower. If you compare to the US 92%, Japan 98%, If you look around the world, there are countries that, knowing the limitation of the country to offer protection, they have done massive programs for private insurances such as China, India, leverages of increase due to the positive economic effect and protection effect. Okay, I'm finishing, I know, my time is a little bit up, but looking at financial vulnerability and looking at the sector as a pillar for protection, we always have to ask ourselves, why is there this low penetration? How can we focus on the solutions of how this low penetration can be altered and work with this growth to be able to address this dramatic situation that we see nowadays?
Estevão, dentro desse
Thank you, Antonio.
de transição
Within this context of demographic transition and green transition, let's say,
como é que você vê
how
os
do you
fundos
see
de previdência de longo prazo, com vocação de
funds?
longo
How do you
prazo,
see pension funds,
e os
private pension funds, and the investments in adaptation, mitigation, climate mitigation, in a way that we can use the resources of our clients in products which actually have provide safety, return, and characteristics in the long run as one way of financing this transition process.
Agradecer primeiro a oportunidade, né, da gente falar pouquinho sobre
First of all, thank you for
acho que
the
o primeiro ponto
opportunity.
aqui é a gente partir do diagnóstico correto, né? E acho que o diagnóstico correto
First, we need the correct diagnosis, and I think this is simple. We have a restriction which is happening, and we have a state that has high debt, above 80% of the GDP. The interest rate is very high, so the fiscal restriction is given already. Then we have two cases which worsen. We have the demographic transition, and the demographic transition is not just happening, it's one of the most accelerated ones in the world. I think Paulo Tachi has brought it here. Brazil is doing the third fastest acceleration accelerated transition. Only China will beat us because during 3 or 4 decades, they could only have one kid, and Japan post-war, right? So apart from the super extreme events, due to obvious reasons, Brazil is the most natural case of demographic transition, which is super accelerated. So what is bad now will become worse along the time. We have these two restrictions, and to get the worst nightmare, we have the technological and climate changes at the same time. So how do I see private retirement, private pensions? First, the diagnosis that private pensions is part of the solution. The public pensions will not be able to address all the situations. And private retirement plans are a possibility to help there. And how can we redirect private retirement plans and become, at the same time, a climate contributor, let's say? First of all, regulations, norms, laws of incentives that will produce the right way. In the past decade, we have evolved a lot in the regulation of private pensions. So regardless of the governments which came along, the agenda has been good in the past 10 years. We have more flexibilities of products, investments, coverage, involving assistances attached to products. So I think people value more and more the attributes for people's coverage, and we have advanced regulations as well pro-client. We had a recent episode of taxes being charged, extra taxes, but we believe that it is a point out of the curve, and we hope to redirect the way so that incentives come in the correct condition, motivating savings accounts, adhesion, and accelerating the process of inducing more and more people to adhere, in particular vulnerables as well. I'm not just mentioning people who are poorer, but I'm talking about the elderly, the people who are reaching 65, 70 years old. They have built their savings account using a logic that is not working, which is a logic in which the public retirement plan was enough, and that you would live perhaps 70 years, but you discover that you will live 85, 90 years, and public retirement plans won't cope with that, won't let you cope with that aging situation. So, first of all, we need to create thematic products with regards to sustainability, to value the companies which have a good conduct, have products which give an access of capital to these companies. This is an important role to be an inducer of good practices. And the second point is to inform people, because financial education is essential to every layer of society. We have made a big effort of simplifying the talk, explaining the relevance of the protection, the relevance of private pension, trying to demystify the idea that this is only for rich people, for those who have a lot of money. This is not true. Nowadays, private retirement plans, you can start with 50 reais a month. You can do small contributions every month, 10, 20 reais, and this can make a big difference in terms of long-time protection of our population. So I think, Edson, I don't have a silver bullet, but once again, I think the solution goes through the coordination between insurance companies, private sector, and public funds that we can complement mostly for adverse events. And I think also, why not international funds as well? We need coordination. Each one has to do their part. We need to talk and be together for more comprehensive solutions.
Eu acho que é importante a gente destacar ponto que você coloca.
I think it's important to highlight a point. The insurance sector nowadays is the main sector for funding public debt in Brazil. We are responsible for something like 17% of the public debt, the people's insurance as well, with 1.7 trillion reais in bonds, about 12.5% of funding of the public debt, and to be surprised by a measure that dismotivates the long-term savings that a retirement plan can help people have, instead of increasing their awareness about the importance of having this kind of retirement plan due to the unsustainability of the public pension system that we have. It's just like shooting your own foot and shooting the main partner of the government in helping the government with the debt. I would like to record that here because I think the theme has appropriately mentioned.
A gente só falou de Brasil.
We only talked about Brazil.
Então vamos falar pouquinho de
So let's talk a little bit about Portugal,
Europa de modo geral, que
Europe in general. You know that very well.
O que existe uma agenda integrada?
Is there an integrated agenda there
em Portugal ou em outros
in
países
Portugal or in other countries in Europe that connects climate risk to public health and life insurance, people's insurance? What can we learn with the European insurance market?
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon.
Antes de mais, muito obrigado pelo convite.
First
É
of
uma
all,
honra
thank you
estar-
for the
estar aqui
invitation. It's an
num painel
honor
tão-
to be
tão
here in such a
Eh,
rich panel.
Indo à sua pergunta, eu não sinto
Well,
que haja
I don't
propriamente
feel that
uma visão integrada
there is an
destes três
integrated
segmentos,
view of
clima,
these three
e vida.
fronts, climate,
Pensando na
health,
parte de
and
vida e
life.
componente do
Well,
alterações
when I think
climáticas,
about
eu fico sempre com a
life
sensação
and climate
que
change,
se
I
espera
have the
que a subida da
sensation
temperatura
that
acabe por ter menos impacto, ou
people
seja, que
are
reduzem as mortes pelas vagas de
expecting
frio
that
e que não seja assim tanto
the heat
pelo
waves
aumento
will
das
not
vagas de
kill
calor.
so
A
many
realidade é que eu sinto
people,
também
but
que
what I
está
feel is that
está a pensar nos aumentos médios
we
e
are
não nos
thinking
extremos,
about
nas
the
situações
average
extremas. E a
increase,
realidade é que
not
são as
the
situações
extreme
extremas é que
increase,
vão
but they
trazer
are
os maiores problemas,
the
seja para
extreme
aqueles
situations
problemas
are
que
the
vamos
ones
ter,
that will
as
bring
situações
us
extremas destas.
problems.
Altas
And
alterações
so,
climáticas vão claramente ter aí impacto
adverse climate effects will
Ao
certainly
nível
have
da
an
saúde, eu
impact
diria que já há bastante mais
on
preocupação
health.
e que já está talvez a ser mais integrada
I think that it's
são
more
os impactos que
integrated
poderá ter, nomeadamente porque os sistemas de
in
saúde
terms of
privada,
impact
de saúde,
because the
estão sempre mais
private
posicionados e, portanto,
insurance
qualquer
companies are more
impacto que possa
positioned.
ter
So any
consequências na
impact that
rentabilidade tem que ser
there
antecipado
may occur in
por
terms
isso
of profitability, they have to be
evitar esses
anticipated.
problemas.
So that's why
Mas,
we know a lot
obviamente,
about risk.
existem
And
exemplos
obviously there
e
are
eu,
examples.
puxando o destaque à fidelidade.
I talk about
E acho que temos a nossa
fidelidade.
estratégia
We have our
integrada,
own
dois
strategies
vetores,
of
um dos mais
integrating
relevantes
two
para nós
vectors,
são, por um lado, a sustentabilidade e,
which
por
are
outro lado, a longevidade.
sustainability and
Temos uma preocupação muito
longevity. So
declarada
we have a
de contribuir
declared
para
worry,
essas
preoccupation to
componentes.
contribute to this
E
too.
pensando nas componentes
And thinking
de
about
longevidade,
the
obviamente,
components
temos
of
muito na saúde
longevity,
e na capacidade
we have
de
to
ter
think of health
sistema mais justo
and
de saúde
the
e mais
possibility of having a
estendido,
more
portanto, com maior
just
protection gap.
health system with
Temos
a
claramente
lower
consciência de que
gap in terms of
os sistemas
protection
de saúde e
and
bem-estar
with
são
awareness
críticos para
raising
a
with
evolução.
regards to the
A fidelidade
health
também,
situation.
estou aqui na COP,
And I'm also here representing the Impact Center for Climate Change. This is a knowledge center that has been created to understand the impact of climate into our insurance work, but also with clients, with the public sector. In other words, to understand how climate affects us all. And we are trying to identify which ones are our priorities. There are many things that can be done. So our focuses in terms of physical risk are related to excessive rain, heat waves, and fires, because in Portugal we've had this critical situation. When we look at socio-economic status as well, system as well, we see that there is a need to look at well-being and health. We have some initiatives in that direction. Of course, we have a clear challenge to create a sensibilization in terms of how the climate will affect people's health. And we have some initiatives which have been awarded prizes as well to be able to create more sensitization, let's say sensitiveness, about how climate will affect people's health. When we think of tendencies that we have been observing that might be used in other geographical areas, we had a consortium with different public and private entities to have information and understand health, study health. We are working on case studies for example, breast cancer and diabetes, but it is a concept that can be expanded to understand all the other diseases which will be part of this context of climate change. And we are working on this data from hospitals, labs, and insurance companies to create an information database. And this was mentioned yesterday here, the importance of databases to be able to create knowledge. So we are working with scientists to understand the evolution of diseases and their dynamics. And another important aspect is prevention. Now, two examples. One related to the precision medicine, understanding what are the vulnerabilities of people so that we can have initiatives to help people avoid these diseases. And still on prevention, implementing or promoting healthy ways of living. The idea is to measure the physical activity of people and motivate them to continue to do the correct amount of physical activity to feed themselves more properly so that their lifestyle and way of life improves. Also related to longevity, and which is related to a problem that we are facing, is the demographic transition. We have to pay assistance to the elderly. We have a program of 60 plus people, where we have a startup which is focused on assisting the elderly, promoting physical activities and anything that will take people, will make people feel better as they age, and support in housing and homing as well, a support to people who are more in need, who are more dependent. Because as the population grows older and people get further away from their relatives, we have also a challenge to be able to care for these people. So we also have an investment in that sense. And the last point that has to do with retirement plans is the scientification of creating more plans. We have an app that can be used simply so that people can do micro savings there. It's a tool that creates a culture of saving, and it's an app for us to interact with clients as well, to be able to motivate these behaviors which are good to promote better elderly life. Thank you, Rui.
Elementos, né? Você trouxe elemento que ainda não tinha surgido, que é o
You
uso
brought an important element, which is the use of technology, and I think it will accelerate a lot the use of technology onboarded in products and services in our sector in the next few years.
Mas eu acho que elemento que você traz na tua
But
fala,
I think an element that you bring in your speech, and which I think we have a lot to learn from, is other services for that population,
idosa, né? Quer dizer, eu acho que
the elderly
cada vez mais
population.
nós vamos ter que embutir
We will have to include services in our products that will cope with the needs of this population, which do not want to depend on their children. They want to go on being autonomous and not depend on their children. Or there are people who have grown old without having children, which is something that has been happening more and more. So services for this public.
É algo que nós ainda temos muito que evoluir aqui no Brasil. Molina, com você eu tenho
Molina. Now with you.
Que é o seguinte, eu pergunto o que eu quiser e você responde
I
o que
ask
você quiser.
what I want, but you answer what you want, okay?
Nós falamos de muita coisa
So
aqui.
we said so many things. We talked about the integration of risks, the integration of public health, aging, work market, the relationships in the work market, technology, mass products. Okay, so what can you tell us about all that?
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I confess that the lecture of Dr. Paulo worried me more than I was worried. And with regards to this group, I think I have a quality issue here because I felt like a client here. So, let's do that for the elderly, for the elderly. Well, I felt like the client here because I am old. And this is my differential of quality in this meeting. I've been through all that. When they invite me to talk about longevity, 20 years ago, I didn't trust people. I thought they invited me because I was old. But now I am sure that they invite me because I am very old. I am 90 years old. So I went through all these scenarios, these phases, the alarming ones for climate and the benefit coverage as well, the situation of not having coverage. So we are here to discuss if and when the impacts of climate disasters will reach the elderly population. It is true, they do. Excessive heat is no good for us. Excessive cold is no good. A catastrophe. The older people cannot escape. They lose their homes due to all these questions. So it makes sense to discuss at the same time sustainability and the social sustainability of the elderly.
Não obstante tudo que conversamos,
okay, so in spite of everything that has been said about the risks
que podem matar pessoas,
that might kill people, the climate might kill people, might worsen the future of humanity,
eu tenho a convicção
I have the conviction, however, that the increase of old age will continue, and I like that. Personally, of course.
Eu gosto de viver mais.
I like to live more.
Então,
so
temos sim
we have an enormous problem of social sustainability ahead of us.
E o caso brasileiro é especial.
And the Brazilian case is special.
Pela velocidade
due to the speed at which the Brazilian society is growing old. And the determining fact that Brazil is growing old before becoming rich, the opposite of many developed countries in the world. Rich first, but they became rich first before they became older. So, and you, Paulo, said something very important. The speed at which the climate changes are impacting the world, especially Brazil, due to its place in the world. So you see, it is a combination of all these factors, the speed at which the Brazilian population is growing old, and the fact that it will have more impacts due to climate change than other countries. So it's more dramatic. All these sustainability issues. Therefore, we are here to discuss at the same time sustainability of the planet. I think it is worth saying that we have to discuss the sustainability of climate on the one hand, but we can also discuss the social sustainability of the elderly, regardless of the climate, because we admit that the climate, of course, will certainly impact the elderly. But let's talk about the social sustainability of the elderly, which should affect us more, mostly due to what I said before, that the country is growing older before it got richer. So what is this subject about? When you think of its foundation, it's about a combination, a pact which is Intergenerational. What is this? Let's remember that the social benefits. Please tell me when my time's up. Let's just remember that the beginning of the time when society started worrying about pensions is not something very, very old. It dates back to the end of the 19th century, when the richer societies, Germany and so on, started worrying about creating welfare programs. Of course, the retirement plans weren't yet part of those worries. They carried about premature death at that time. People died when they were 40, 42. There wasn't a possibility of living so long, having an old age where you wouldn't work. I don't believe in that anymore. I think people will work. I always remember that at the end of the 19th century in Germany, the first social benefits or welfare were for. It was the beginning of the first industrial revolution. Machines were still hurt people. So Bismarck had the idea of creating a benefit for those who might have been injured. So this evolved, and between the First and the Second World War, then we started having the guaranteed idle time. So an idle time that is guaranteed by society. So we had a pact, intergenerational pact. A number of children that would be a great number of active people who would support the elderly. When I was born in 1936, the life expectancy in Brazil was 44. If I had been an individual that was statistically correct, I would have died in the 80s. Then 40 more years have gone in my life, and I am technically, just like piled up garbage. But I should have died, but not only me, but there's a great number of me's in the society. This is what it is about. This beauty of society, of longevity. Because we have a scarce birth of children nowadays, there was a breach of this intergenerational pact that we used to have. The younger supporting the older. So who will pay this bill now? Will we be able to tell people that we lied to them for about 50 years? This audience here, on average, I think you are about 35 years old, 40 years old on average. They are paying for their pension, their retirement plan. They may even be saving privately, using a retirement plan or not. I hope you do. Because we have some bad news for you. The biggest benefit of the social security that you have in 20 and 30 years will be a minimum wage, and that's it. And you won't be supported anymore by payrolls of people who are working under the right kind of documents, because young people, they don't want to do that. They don't want to pay public retirement pensions. So we have something brand new in Brazil going on in the world, especially here. Because on average, the income here is about 2,000 reais a month. It guarantees benefits of 8,000 reais. It's extravagant. No one will be able to pay that. You have to tell the Brazilian people the truth. Okay? And the problem is politicians don't want to talk about that because they won't be elected if they say so. So I think the insurance market has a transcendental mission here. We have to tell people the truth. Save that. Save money because society won't have money to support great programs of social security. This is the issue. Just to finish off. What can we do in terms of insurance for the elderly? We know that the elderly want to have a lifelong income, as there used to be in the past. But this doesn't exist anymore because in this kind of income, there are two components which have to be there, which is until when are you going to live and what will be the future interest rate. This is not possible for the market anymore to classify these two phenomena. So the biggest challenge that we have as professionals in this area and in society as a whole is to create new mechanisms that will attend to people's needs, particularly those who have saved during their active life and that have created some sort of deposit and that would like to have some security for the moment when they are inactive. And I don't believe anymore that the human person must stop working. What I understand is that individuals have to save throughout their lives and reach a moment in their lives when they start to use those savings and at the same time continue working, but with a lower level of stress. This is the general scenario. I have no doubt. I'm not talking about myself only because I still work being 90 years old. I do what I like, so all of us will have to work. I remember that when we started selling retirement pensions many years ago, we showed a couple of elderly people sitting on the beach with a hat, looking happy. Nowadays, this is over. This is over. All of us and all of you will work until your near death. Thank you very much. The news is not good. I don't know why you applauded me. Oh gosh. If you thought that the Paulo's lecture was scary. Okay, now Molina.
É muito bacana, né?
It's really good.
E para mim é prazer sempre te escutar.
And for me, it's a pleasure to listen to you. But to see that the disruption of thought comes from the elderly person in the panel. It is actually a disruptive kind of thought. And it is a thought that we are not used to.
E só para não deixar também de pegar o teu gancho, Molina, eu tive o prazer.
And I had the pleasure.
Mais ou menos 5 anos atrás,
4 or 5 years ago, along with you and Professor Edison Rubinstein, we had the pleasure of developing a proposal for the reform, the structural reform of the Fenabreve, that you and I, on many occasions, we delivered to the economic teams of all the presidents to be in the last election, in which we explained that the reform needed to have 4 pillars: the basic income, a pillar which was similar to INSS, a pillar for a mandatory
por
contribution
capitalização
by
individual,
capitalization
gerida
individual
em
one,
regime de livre
managed
escolha e livre concorrência pela
in
iniciativa
free
privada,
competition by
e
the
o último
private
pilar
sector,
de
and the last
contribuições
pillar on
voluntárias.
voluntary
Nós vamos ter que
contributions.
fazer isso de novo
We will have to do
no
that
ano que
again
vem,
next year
mas talvez com
for
uma
the
mensagem
presidential
mais dura,
elections,
porque
but
naquele
perhaps with a
momento
harder message,
a gente dizia
because at
que
that moment we
ainda
used to
era
say that it
possível
was still possible
fazer essa reforma
to do
só
this
para novos
reform
entrantes, garantindo o direito adquirido daqueles que já
for
estão no
new
sistema.
onboarders,
Nós vamos
guaranteeing
ter
the
que
rights of
refazer
those
essas
who were
contas,
already in the system, but we'll
porque
have to
talvez
recalculate
isso já
that
não
because
seja mais
maybe
possível.
maybe this is
Posso
no
quebrar
longer
pouquinho a
possible.
Pode? Eu ia falar exatamente isso.
I was going to say that.
E ver, a primeira vez que eu me
The
atrevi
first time that I dared
a pensar no assunto
to think about this subject
foi na década de 70.
was in the
O
70s.
ministro da Previdência no Brasil era Nascimento Silva.
Nascimento Silva was the minister
Eu
at
já
the
fazia
time,
parte da CNseg na
and
época.
I was part
Numa
of
reunião do Conselho Nacional
CNseg
de
at
Seguros
the
Privados, eu não era
time.
membro, eu ficava
I
naquela
wasn't
cadeira
a
que fica atrás da
member. I
mesa,
sat on the
tal,
chair that was
olhar,
behind the table.
Mas eu já tinha começado a ler,
But
não
I
digo
started
estudar, mas ler e me
reading.
informar. Estou falando da década de 70.
I'm talking about
Sobre a
the
longevidade dos
70s.
países ricos
I
da Europa,
started
basicamente.
studying about
Itália,
longevity in Europe.
França. Pedida pelo ministro Nascimento Silva, eu pedi licença para ele, na hora do cafezinho, de conversar com ele 5 minutos, que ele me concedesse 5 minutos de atenção. Ele era uma pessoa muito educada, etc. Eu mais atrevido, porque eu tinha uns 40 anos de idade.
I was 40 at the time.
Essa chuva está fora de hora.
Wow, there's rain here.
O que dizia o paper? Ele dizia, ministro, eu tenho lido muito sobre o que está acontecendo
I have been
no
reading
mundo
a
mais
lot
velho
of
sobre a
what's
longevidade.
happening about
E acho que
longevity.
o Brasil podia tomar uma iniciativa de fazer um novo programa de seguro social só para os novos trabalhadores. Só para os novos trabalhadores. Acho que o som foi embora, né? Só para os novos trabalhadores.
Only for new
Não
workers.
ferindo direito. E nem expectativa de
Okay.
direito. O direito é aquele que está recebendo.
Not
não é
the
isso?
expectation
E a
of
expectativa
those
do
who
direito é
are
aqueles
who
que
have
estão
the
pagando,
right
sem ferir.
and for
Mas
those
fazem
who are
50
paying.
anos,
It's
ele me
been
respondeu
50
o seguinte,
years that I
olha, eu
said
não
that.
entendo nada de
He answered, I don't
longevidade,
understand
mas eu não
about
posso levar
longevity,
adiante esse seu papel.
but I can't
As sobras
take this forward
financeiras do
because
INSS
the leftovers
acabaram
from
de construir Brasília.
INSS have just built
Montevideo,
Brasilia,
Niterói, etc.
have just built
Que dinheiro estamos
Niterói.
fazendo isso? Com a sobra
So
do
with
seguro
which
social.
money are we doing
Portanto,
that? We
não
are
há
doing
como
that with
levar isso
social
adiante.
security money.
E não aconteceu nada.
So nothing
Esse
happened.
trabalho que você se referiu,
This
nós também
work
já
that
tínhamos
you
feito
refer
junto com a
to,
CNseg.
we had
O
worked
governo
together with the
se
Ministry of
iniciaria no
Social
Fernando Henrique
Security
Cardoso. Fizemos a
in
mesma
Fernando
coisa.
Henrique
Fizemos a
Cardoso's
mesma coisa com o
government.
governo,
We
com
did
o último
the
governo.
same with the last
Mas
government.
por que eu estou com dois
But
aqui, cara?
why do I have two microphones here?
É exagero meu.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating, right?
Eu não sei até
So
quando
I don't know how
a
far
política
Edson,
brasileira
Brazilian
vai tomar
politics,
coragem, não é isso?
I don't know when they will be brave
E não
enough
cabe mais reforma.
because
Isso
reforms,
é dramático.
you
Não
know,
tem
this is
mais
what
que
is dramatic.
reformar.
There is nothing else to reform. We need something
Fazer
new.
novo sistema.
We need a new system.
Novo sistema que
A
vai
new
falar
system
exatamente a verdade.
that will
Eu
tell
quero-
the truth. I'm sorry
na minha
that I
idade,
have
eu digo.
interrupted you.
Tem todo o direito do mundo e é isso mesmo.
Okay, that's
Eu
it.
queria passar agora,
I
voltar
would
para o
like
Vinícius.
now to go back
Vamos
to
ter que falar mais
Vinicius.
alto aqui,
Vinicius,
porque a gente está falando que o setor de seguros
we
tem
are
que
saying
aumentar
that
o
the
tom de
insurance
voz
sector
nesse
has
debate,
to
né?
speak
Então,
louder
vamos
this
começar por
debate.
agora.
So we have to start now.
Vinícius, você falou
Vinicius,
sobre
you talked about
a questão de ampliação
the
das
question
desigualdades,
of
tanto na
the
questão
inequalities,
das novas relações trabalhistas,
the new relationships, work relationships, and
agravada por tudo
which
isso que nós
are
estamos falando
aggravated
aqui
by all that has
de
been mentioned
envelhecimento
here in terms
populacional e
of
crise climática.
growing old and climate
Quais
crisis.
são os caminhos, na visão
What
da
are the
Organização Internacional do
ways?
Trabalho, quais são os caminhos
What are the
que vocês
ways
enxergam
that you
para
see
fortalecer os
to
sistemas de
strengthen
proteção
the
social diante
social
disso
protection
tudo que nós estamos
systems?
dizendo e diante dessas
When facing
pressões
all that,
fiscais
we have
enormes que
been
os
mentioning, and
governos
this fiscal
enfrentarão.
pressure that the governments will face.
Muito obrigado, é sempre bom escutar o Dr. Molina.
Thank you. It's good
meus
to listen
colegas.
to Dr. Molina and the colleagues.
Não, primeiro, como eu mencionei na minha primeira intervenção,
Like I
então a gente
said
está
in my first intervention,
numa fase diferente do que é o
we are going through a
o
different
textbook de
phase
envelhecimento.
from
A relação de
a
dependência
different phase of the
ela tá se
textbook of
deteriorando,
longevity.
mas os jovens que estão entrando no mercado de
The young
trabalho,
people who are
eles
coming
não
into
fazem
the
parte mais da base de financiamento
work
da
market,
social,
they are
eles
not
são
funding anymore the
porque o
social
mercado de
security
trabalho
because
também está
the
mudando, né?
market
Então,
is
são
changing.
pessoas que
So there are
vão para
people
informalidade,
who
ou então eles
have
também
informal
dentro do sistema
jobs
de incorporação de
and
tecnologia,
they
ficam por conta
incorporate
própria.
technology that saves the work,
Contexto de alta
saves
desigualdade no brasileiro,
headcounts as well. So
isso
inequality
requer
is increasing. This
uma renda mínima.
requires
Tá? Então, eu
a
acho que esse é um
minimum
contexto
wage. And
que me
this is
parece
a
que é um
context which
consenso
seems
dos
to
vários
be a
setores.
consensus
Seja qual
among
for
the
o tipo de
sectors.
modelo de
Whatever
proteção social,
model it
tem que ter
is,
valor
there
mínimo
must be a
assegurado pelo
minimum
Estado
wage
e
which
que
is
não
insured by the
seja
state and which is
desincentivador
not
de participação no mercado de trabalho. Porque tem isso
demotivating
também, né? Em alguns casos, né, a
in
renda
terms
mínima
of
especial
who
para
is going to
pessoas em
keep
idade
working.
laboral acaba
Sometimes
funcionando como
this
mecanismo
works as a mechanism that
desincentiva
demotivates
ou
people
o
from
trabalho ou a
continuing to
formalização do
work
trabalho. Né? Então,
or from
essa,
continuing
e aí
to
estamos falando, por
formally
exemplo, do Bolsa
work,
Família,
which
né?
is even worse. We're
Encontrar
talking
mecanismos
about
de
Bolsa
ativação, de
Família. People can
formalização
receive that and still keep
institucionalizados do Bolsa
working.
Família. E hoje de manhã eu tive,
So,
inclusive, com o
in
ministro
the morning,
Wellington Dias,
I
que
was
se
with
discute as relações
Wellington
com o
Dias,
Belém,
it is
né?
the
É
minister,
fundamental. Né? Esse é um dos
and
grandes
it is
desafios
fundamental. This is
que
one
tem
of
que
the
ter
challenges
adiante, porque, na verdade,
that we need to face
modelo de previdência baseado
because the
na
model based
formal
on the
sobre a folha
formal
algo que
contribution is
não tem
something
sustentabilidade a
that
longo prazo.
is not sustainable.
Agora, é fundamental ter também
It is
mecanismo
fundamental to have
redistributivo. Né?
a
Porque a gente está falando, claro, de
redistribution
assegurar
mechanism
condições
because
mínimas, que é uma
we are
questão
talking about
de
ensuring
dignidade,
minimal
mas é fundamental
conditions,
ter
but
pilar
it's fundamental to
redistributivo.
have a
Pode
redistribution
pensar em
pillar.
sistema de 3 pilares ou 4 pilares,
You
como
can
vocês
think of
estão
3 or
propuseram.
4 pillars
Mas
as
a
you have
proposição
proposed,
da capitalização
but the
com a
capitalization, the
repartição
proposal of
fundamental.
capitalization
Então, os sistemas
is
mistos
fundamental.
hoje
So the
têm se
mixed
mostrado
systems
mais resilientes
are
e mais
fundamental. They
adaptáveis
have shown to
no
be
futuro.
more resilient, more adapted to the
E
future.
em relação
And
ao papel, né, que esses
with
sistemas
regards
têm,
to
né,
the
foi
role these
mencionado
systems
no
have,
painel, né, o papel que os fundos
it
de
was
pensão têm
mentioned
não somente
before
pública,
in terms of
mas
pension
também em
funds
canalizar
and
investimentos
helping
para isso é
to the
fundamental.
countries
Porque hoje a
that
poupança
this is
de longo
fundamental
prazo, né,
because
orientada
long-term
para investimentos que tenham
savings
responsabilidade
oriented
social,
for investments which are
o uso de
socially
pensão, né, e
important,
sistemas de investidores institucionais como um todo, deve servir de farol,
it
né, para os
should
demais.
be like a headlight for the others.
De longo prazo que existe. E
Because
essa
this
que, no
is
final
the
das contas,
only long-term savings that we have, and this generates job,
fundamental, claro, ter políticas redistributivas,
generates
né, pelo lado da
possibilities
base,
of income.
mas a longo prazo só isso
And
não
in the
basta,
long
é fundamental
run,
gerar emprego,
it's
gerar
important to
riqueza,
generate
e aí, a partir daí,
jobs, generate
tirar as
wealth,
pessoas da linha
and
de pobreza.
then
Então, eu vejo essas
get
duas
people
combinações,
out
demanda
of the
oferta
poverty
e oferta
line.
demanda.
So I see these two
Perfeito.
sides, demand and offer.
Dentro das suas colocações, eu
Okay,
queria,
now
Estevão,
considering what you have said, Stephen,
te pedir, quer dizer,
I'd like to
Bradesco
ask you, because
gigante com
Bradesco
uma
is a giant
capilaridade
with a
enorme.
capillarity
E dentro
which is
dessa mesma
enormous.
temática, né,
So within the
nesse
same
país
theme,
de tanta
in this country
informalidade,
of such a lot of
eu
informality,
fico pensando aqui não só do
I
ponto de
keep
vista
thinking,
previdenciário, mas
not
também
just in
de
terms
outros
of
produtos de seguros, né?
social security, but other products as well. How do you see
o papel de uma
the
instituição
role
financeira
of a financial institution,
da
which
sua,
is the size of
nesse processo
yours,
de inclusão?
in this process of financial
Muito bem. Do ponto
inclusion?
de vista individual do grupo,
Well,
a gente tem primeiro
individually,
uma grande missão, que
from
é
the
como é que
group,
a
we have a
gente
great mission, which
comunica
is
seguro de
how do we
pessoas, previdência de forma mais
communicate
simples.
in
Acho
a
que esse é
simpler
o
way?
desafio número um,
I
né? A
think
gente
this
ainda
is
tem
the
muita
challenge
complexidade
number
na
one.
forma
We
de
have a
falar dos
lot of
temas. Às vezes a
complexity
gente até
when we
comunica
talk
mais do que
about
deveria.
themes. Sometimes we
Então, eu acho que
complicate more
como é
than
que a
we
gente
should.
consegue fazer uma comunicação
So
mais
how
simples e
can
nos
we
canais
communicate
adequados?
in a
Talvez
more
no passado
simple
fosse mais
way in the
difícil, mas hoje a
adequate
gente tem
channels? Perhaps in the
centenas de milhões
past
de
it
pessoas que
was
acessam mídia social
more
todo dia.
difficult, but
Então, a gente
nowadays
se reinventar
people
nos
are on
canais que a gente
social
comunica,
media. I think
não
perhaps we
só na
need
forma,
to
mas nos
improve
canais de
the way
acesso.
we
Então, a gente tem feito um
communicate.
esforço grande de
We have
quebrar a
made an
bolha da
effort
comunicação mais
of
convencional
breaking this
em meios
conventional
como
bubble of
televisão,
communication
rádio, que está tudo
on
certo, continuam
TV,
funcionando bem.
radio, and so
Mas a
on.
gente
They
precisa
still
falar no
work, but
TikTok, precisa
we
falar no
need to
Instagram,
be on
que é onde as
TikTok,
pessoas
on
estão o dia inteiro
Instagram. This is
recebendo
where people
comunicações,
are
conteúdos,
all
e eu acho que
day
esse é um caminho que
receiving
a gente pode
content. I think this
potencializar
is a
muito
way that
com
we
o uso da
can
tecnologia.
potentialize
Esse é
with
o
the
passo
use
número um.
of
O passo
technology.
número 2, eu
Okay,
diria que é a
step two, I
simplificação
would
de
say the
produtos e de acessos.
simplification of
Então, acho que o seguro ele
products
tem
and
a
access.
mágica do
I
mutualismo
think
que às vezes a gente aproveita mal
insurance
dentro,
has a
principalmente do
magic
seguro de
that
pessoas.
we
Na hora
don't
que a gente
use
consegue ganhar
so well in
escala,
terms
ter a
of
prática do
people's
mutualismo
insurance.
mais ampliada,
When we
eu
can
acho que em
use
eventos extremos isso é super
mutualism, I
relevante.
think for
Os
adverse
eventos
effects,
extremos
this is
acontecem
really
pouco, mas se a
important.
gente tiver um monte de
They
gente pagando
happen
um
very
pouquinho
little,
cada um
but
para
if
se
everyone's
proteger,
paying a
na
little
hora que
to
vem um evento
protect
extremo,
themselves,
você tem um
when you
bolsão
have an
que consegue
extreme
cobrir
adverse
todo mundo.
event,
Então,
you have
eu acho que a gente
enough to be
revisitar
able to
formas de
cover
acesso desse
for everyone.
mutualismo
So
mais amplo para ganhar escala
revisit
e para a gente ter
this more
soluções
comprehensive
que
mutualism for
tenham
us to
aderência a esse
scale
desafio dos
and
eventos
to get
extremos,
solutions
pode
which
ajudar
are
também.
better. This can
E aí,
help
só para
as
não
well.
gastar muito tempo e dando um
And
pitaco aqui nas duas
okay,
questões que a
just to give
Tumorina
some
trouxe,
opinion as well,
eu acho
what
que a gente
Molina has
deveria
said.
pensar tanto na
I
reforma
think
da
we should
Previdência,
think in terms
quanto na
of the
questão da
Social
renda
Security
vitalícia, que são coisas
reform
distintas, mas a
and
gente deveria pensar em soluções
lifelong
paramétricas daqui
income,
para
but we
frente.
should
O
think
que
of
eu digo com isso? Que a
parametric
gente tenha
solutions.
determinados
What do I
gatilhos
mean?
que, se
That we
a
have some
tábua de sobrevivência se
triggers
alterar,
that if the
automaticamente
survival
a condição da
rate
previdência pública
alters the
ou a condição da
condition
renda
of
vitalícia
the
se altere. Então, acho que a gente
public
reduziria
social
muito
security
o grau
or
de
the condition
incerteza do
of
que você
retirement
concedeu
plans
de
can be
benefício
altered.
no caso
In
da
other words,
seguradora, e o
things
grau
can be
de
altered depending on the
tensão política
situation
de
that
você
we are
aprovar a
going
cada
through.
4 anos uma
Instead of
nova
just,
reforma da
going
Previdência com
through this
novos
political
parâmetros.
tension, trying to get an
É uma
approval
repactuação
for
natural
the
a partir de uma
reform.
tábua
I
que se
think it should
altere
be like
pelo
that. It
IBGE,
should
por qualquer
be
instituto
a
que o
system that
seja.
could
Então,
be
eu
altered
acho que a gente já tem um pouco
regardless of
aprendizado de
who is
quão
on the
custoso é
presidency or on the
politicamente cada
government.
reforma da Previdência,
We know how much they
e que na
cost, these
questão da renda
reforms,
vitalícia, no
and
final das
that
contas,
with
virou uma
regards to
restrição de oferta.
lifelong
Nenhuma seguradora mais quer comprar o risco da
lifelong income,
longevidade
no
ou o
one
risco da
wants
taxa
to
de juros.
buy this
De tal forma
risk
que se você tivesse algum
because
ajuste
if you
paramétrico
have a
pré-estabelecido,
parametric
acho que a gente teria
adjustment
um
which was
caminho. Então, só
pre-established,
como
perhaps there
provocação
would
a
be
partir
a
dos
way,
pontos que o
okay?
Molina
Just
trouxe
a
aqui.
provocation.
Obrigado, Estevão.
Thank you, Stephen.
Ontem aqui no painel,
Yesterday in the
Michel
panel,
não estou falando isso porque
Michel Lier, I'm not saying this because Michel Lier is the boss of my boss, but it's because he said something very interesting.
Seria muito
He
bom
said
se
that it would be really
se os
good
governos
if
tivessem
governments
o equivalente a chief
had
risk
the
officer
equivalent
com quem
to
a
a
gente
chief
pudesse
risk
conversar.
officer
Porque é
with
muito
whom we
difícil
could
você
talk.
falar de riscos,
Because it's
sejam
very hard
riscos
for you to
climáticos,
talk
sejam
about risks,
riscos
climatic risks
de
or
longevidade,
longevity risks,
com ministros da economia,
with
né,
ministers of the
forma geral.
economy and with
Então, eu
politicians.
acho que às vezes
I think
eu fico pensando que
sometimes if we had,
a provocação que você faz
I think the
exigiria
provocation
realmente
that
que nós
you have done,
tivéssemos uma interlocução
what I would say is
dentro
we
dos
should have
governos
some
com quem
sort of
realmente sabe
interlocution with someone
avaliar
inside the
riscos,
government
né?
who would know how to evaluate risks.
Antônio,
Antônio,
Você é de uma seguradora global,
you come
muitas
from
vêm
a
incorporando
global insurance company. Many
critérios
have been
ESG ou
incorporating
ASG
ESG
em
or
produtos
ESG
de proteção
criteria in protection
individual.
products for
Como é que
individuals.
você vê
how do you see Brazil inserted in that context, our market?
Isso é realmente uma.
Is it really, can it really be translated in competitive advantage, or
de propósito do setor e das
is
empresas?
it more a question of purpose?
Porque na verdade é pouco dos dois, né?
Well, that's a good point.
Já existe a incorporação de
A little bit of both.
na metrificação de
We
risco,
incorporated ESG in the metrification of risks, and it's also a criteria for choice. But this is an important debate because COP is not just about the environment. Nowadays, today, we are talking about a model for social ambiental development. So, among health and many other discussions, the longevity and climate and how they are intertwined, when we talk about ESG, it's the interconnection between the capacity that the insurance company has to propose a product and the view of the consumer about that. And when we look here in Brazil, this incorporation of this debate, climate change agenda and business agenda and public policies agenda, maybe we will have three main ways to go. The first one is the improvement of the pre-existing coverage, because you would have a product in which the offer you are giving would already have effects of mitigation and effects of prevention. The insurance companies stimulate a clear view about the protection, and we can do this discussion about existing products. We have also talked about coverage. The expansion of coverage will have this effect. The second, amplifying this discussion, besides what we have mentioned here about damage insurance, a new type of assistance and coverage has a great potential to be developed, including with the capacity of customization by the client. So this vector of the widening of the scope is also very important. And the third most important one for me is the strengthening of the cooperation between public and private sector, an incentive to the creation of products.
Sobre o potencial de utilização de outros modelos, por exemplo, de seguro paramétrico, que já existe hoje, e seguro de danos, já ampliar isso para seguro de vida, fazendo uma associação com seguro de vida em grupo,
making a connection with group insurance to mitigate climate effects. There is the capacity within the flexible regulatory model for you to do that. You can go to more affected areas and create a paramedic insurance for people where there is a possibility for a pool of insurance companies to protect. So there are possible ways that have to be studied, thinking about how the industry will act and the government will act so that we can widen the level of protection. But this is an initiative which has been inaugurated. We have to advance in this agenda and have better opportunities to, we may have better opportunities to amplify the coverage once there is cooperation and partnerships.
Obrigado, Antônio. E Rui, tanto a questão do avanço dos riscos climáticos como
about the advance of climate risk, longevity that we are discussing here, they put some pressure on our traditional models of subscription. First of all, because we subscribe looking backwards. And sometimes the speed, on the point of view of climate change and aging, or the speed is not proportionate to what happened in the past. So,
evolui nesse
How
sentido
can
para
the sector
modelos mais
evolve in that sense
baseados
to models which are more based on
dados, modelos dinâmicos,
data,
né?
dynamic
Em que a gente
models,
possa,
in
modelos
which
mais
we can
preditivos do
predict
que
more correctly
necessariamente olhando para trás.
than looking backwards?
Acho que a palavra-chave é mesmo preditivo. Acho que vamos ter que prever. Se as
The
seguradoras
key word
querem
is
cumprir o seu
forecast.
papel social,
If insurance companies want to fulfill their social roles, to be able to decrease the protection gap, finding innovative solutions, they have to know the risk. You don't shoot in the dark. Insurance companies can't do that because it can damage the responsibilities it has with the client. So we have to understand well what are the future perspectives, forecasting. So for people insurance, there is a lot of added knowledge and value. So we have to create capacity within the insurance companies of investigating, of communicating with scientists, and do the combination of the information and to translate that information, combined information, so that we can make people aware as well of what they need to survive. And looking at the challenges, we have a number of uncertainty sources. We don't know how the climate change will impact. We don't know the diseases of the future. We don't know what will happen with the demographic transition. Probably there will be more pressure on the health system as well. We know there are also positive points, which is the evolution of medicine, the success of the prevention models that we have. We don't know so many things about the style of life. As you can see, many things that we don't know. We have a number of sources of uncertainty, and we have to integrate this in our studies. We have to do a study about fires. We are doing a study about fire, checking about the risk, because the forest risks in Portugal are very high. So we are checking how we are today and do a simulation of what will happen with different scenarios of climate change, land occupation, socio-economic behavior, how people might ignite a fire, and create a scenario to explain, try to explain what would the risk be for the future. So we will have to create scenarios which are as much as possible similar to the truth, to understand how diseases, the climate, the health system, all these factors will impact. So I know it's a lot of uncertainty, but I can deal with an uncertainty that I can at least predict a variable instead of lacking total knowledge, lacking knowledge. So that's what makes the difference. We need this characterization to be able to understand what will effectively be the risk and to identify opportunities to prioritize which interventions will have to be done, trying to potentialize the prevention of mortality. Yesterday and today, prevention has been mentioned a lot, with the potential of the worsening of the risks that we have at the moment. We can't just think that the systems will be resilient enough to be able to put out everything that is necessary to be put out. We have to invest on prevention, and these modulations of risk help us understand how we have to help, not overloading the systems, trying to keep the systems accessible. Otherwise, I won't be able to answer to the challenges universally. It's much more comprehensive than we might be able to protect. Thank you for your answer. It is the union of data analysis and the evolution of artificial intelligence. All that has a key role.
5 minutos para
Molina,
suas considerações finais.
5 minutes for your
pra gente
final
encerrar o painel.
considerations because we have to finish the panel.
Eu vou falar alguma coisa que tem
I'll say something
muita
that
coisa diretamente que ver
is
com
not
seguro,
directly to do with the
que é a
insurance,
questão do preconceito
which is prejudice.
com os mais velhos.
Prejudice against the
E
elderly.
aí é o meu diferencial de qualidade.
And this is my quality
percebo
differential. I
todos os
realize
dias,
that
particularmente,
every day,
certo?
personally
Termino de fazer
included.
uma reunião, não é isso?
So
Uma
if you're
palestra,
going
qualquer
to a
coisa,
meeting or a lecture, and then they say, wow, but you're doing fine for your age. What does he mean? He means I should be dead.
eu apenas respondo.
So I just answer,
Realmente estou muito bem.
really, I am doing fine from here up.
Mas, então,
So,
veja, a
you
Organização
see,
Mundial de Saúde,
the World
até
Health
hoje,
Organization,
classifica
even
um idoso
today,
com 60 anos de
classifies
idade.
an elderly as someone
Não
who's
tem qualquer
60.
sentido isso.
There is no meaning in that.
Não tem qualquer sentido.
No meaning at all.
Não tem qualquer sentido na minha empresa
In
mesmo.
my
Ela não
company,
admitia um cara com 60
we
anos de idade.
wouldn't
Eu vi
admit a person who is 60.
intelectual.
How come? They
Eu
are
tenho
still
muitos
in their
fracassos na
intellectual
vida,
vigor.
portanto,
I have
muito
many
sucesso,
failures in
Um
my
dos
life,
fracassos
as well as
passou por
successes, but
todas as empresas que
one
eu
of the
trabalhei, inclusive no
failures,
Bradesco,
including when I
é
was
que eu
at
gostaria que
Bradesco,
o
was
nosso
that I would
departamento
like
de recursos
our
humanos
HR
fizesse
departments
seleção às
to
cegas.
select people,
Na
let's say,
proposta de
blindly, all right?
não
In
deveria
the
ter
job proposal, there
se é
shouldn't
homem ou
be
mulher,
if it's
se
a
é
man
branco,
or a
negro
woman,
ou
white,
amarelo,
black,
e
brown,
qual é a idade.
and the
As
age.
pessoas deveriam ser
People
admitidas
should
pelo seu
be
conhecimento.
admitted due to their
Depois eu vou ver
knowledge.
se é branco, se é
And
amarelo,
then
se é
I'll
negro,
see
se é
if it's
velho, se é
white, black,
moço,
brown,
homem
young,
ou
old,
mulher.
man, woman.
O preconceito é imenso.
Prejudice is huge.
Veja,
See,
como é que o velho se vê?
how does the
Como é que o
elderly
jovem
sees
vê o velho?
themselves and how do the young see
Mas
the
pouco
old?
tempo atrás, como
A
disse há
while
pouco, eu sou
ago,
testemunha
I am a
disso, do
witness,
preconceito.
all right, of
E
prejudice.
eu, até como
And
especialista no
as a
assunto, eu
specialist in
percebo
this
com mais
subject,
clareza
I realize
esse
it more
preconceito.
clearly. I
Eu
see
estava em
that
São Paulo,
prejudice more
eu
clearly.
ia para o Rio,
I was in
o
São
avião
Paulo,
não
I was
estava
going
no
to Rio.
Finger, tinha que
The
descer uma
plane
escadinha,
wasn't in
pegar
the
o
finger.
ônibus,
I
não é
had
isso?
to go down a
E
few
eu
steps
subo
to
no
take the
ônibus, eu estava
bus.
com a minha
I go
pastinha,
on to
eu
the
estava
bus. I
segurando
had
aqui,
my
não é isso? De
briefcase.
pé,
I was holding
e
up
na
here
minha
with my
frente uma
hand,
mulher.
and a woman right in
Ela
front
fez
of me.
menção de me levantar.
She
O
wanted
que
to
ela
get
estava
up
vendo?
for me to
Velho,
sit. What
que
was she
eventualmente
seeing?
precisaria de
An old man
apoio.
that needed
O que eu
support.
disse para ela
What did I
e o que
tell
eu
her on
poderia
the
ter
spot?
pensado.
And what I could have
O
thought.
que eu disse para ela?
I said to
Obrigado,
her,
estou
thank
bem.
you very much. I'm doing
O que eu pensei? Minha
What did
querida,
I
não me
think? My
constrange, estou
dear,
quase te cantando.
please, I am almost flirting
Ou
with
seja,
you, and
como
you
é
will
que
think that I
ela
am
me viu?
old.
Ela me viu
So
como
how
velho.
did she see me?
Eu
She
a
saw
vi
me
como uma
as an
mulher.
old man. And how did I see her? I saw her as a woman.
Isso é assim.
So this is how it is.
Velho, o
Old,
idoso,
the old,
ele tem
the
sonhos,
elderly, they have
tem
dreams as
propósito,
well. They
tem
have
objetivos,
purposes,
tem
they
que ser
have
respeitado,
objectives,
Lúcia.
they have to be respected.
E tem uma grande questão para
And that
terminar,
is
estou
a
vendo que o
great
reloginho
issue
está quase
because I know
terminando.
the clock's ticking
É a
here.
questão da
It is
requalificação
the question
profissional.
of professional
O
requalification.
sujeito está com 100%
Okay, so the
da sua
person
capacidade
has
laborativa, é
100%
carregador
of
de
its
sacos.
capacity. They
E a
carry
força
bags.
é o
The
máximo da
strength
sua
is
capacidade
the
laboral, não é
maximum
isso?
of their
E que
labor
ela é decrescente.
capacity, and which will
Aos
decrease, okay? The
50
strength
anos,
to hold a bag.
ele tem
When they
zero
are
de capacidade
50,
laboral
they have
de
zero
carregar sacos.
laboral
E
capacity
por
for
isso a
carrying
sociedade
bags.
aposenta esse
And
cara.
that's why
Não,
society retires this guy.
requalifique esse
No,
indivíduo.
let's requalify this guy.
Oficial do Exército Brasileiro,
This, an
da
official
Marinha,
from
da
the army,
Aeronáutica, do
from
Brasil e do
the
mundo.
Air
É uma
Force
carreira
or
diferente,
Marines, it's a
porque ela é
different kind of
piramidal,
career
não é isso?
because it's a
1000
pyramid,
tenentes,
right?
daqui a 30
You are
anos não podem ter 1000
lieutenant,
generais,
and
não é isso?
then you can become, if you have 1,000 lieutenants, you won't have 1,000 generals or colonels or so on, okay?
Ele vai para
So when you are
aposentadoria
not
com outro
promoted,
número
they
mas ele vai para aposentadoria.
they are
Com
retired.
52,
With
53 anos. E
50,
durante
when
os
they are
30 anos de
52,
exército,
53, And during the 30 years in the army, they did courses. They became doctors or engineers or pharmacists or administrators. Isn't that like that in the army? So when they are 52, they have to leave the army. But he's a doctor. Okay, why don't they work as a doctor till they are 70? Society will support him when he is 52? Does it make any sense? If he will die when he is 90, he contributed for 30 years and he will receive a benefit for 40 years. Who is paying? The government? No. The government is just the treasury. Those who are paying, population, the society. So in the end of the day, because I am really right on time, respect the old people. Okay, so I thank everyone for having come here. I finished the panel. I thank all the lecturers, all the panelists here. Thank you very much for all your contributions. Thank you, all participants of today. I would like also to thank once again our empowerers, Allianz, AXA, BBC Insurance, Bradesco Seguros, Caixa Seguridade, Mafre, Marsh McLennan, Prudential, Porto, and Tokyo Marine. Just reminding you that all lecturers will be available in our channel on YouTube. I invite you all for a cocktail offered by AXA. Have an excellent evening.